Star Wars is possibly the most famous fictional piece ever made. And since it premiered in 1977, there have been countless video games set in that galaxy far, far away. 2D classics, action-adventure, hack-and-slash, shooters, both third-person and first-person, but there have been surprisingly few RPGs. You'd think it would be an ideal genre for Star Wars. Assemble a group of charismatic characters of various races, backgrounds, and abilities on a spaceship and face off against the forces of darkness. But a lack of quantity doesn't imply a lack of quality. Do you remember Fallout New Vegas? That incredible open-world RPG, so good that no one can stop talking about it even 15 years after its release? BioWare made the first one, but the second Knights of the Old Republic, nicknamed KOTOR 2, was made by Obsidian, the creators of New Vegas. I'm going to discuss this game in excruciating detail from beginning to end, including why it's now considered so good when it was mostly ignored at the time. But first, to make sure we're all on the same page, I'll describe the lore leading up to KOTOR 2, namely the Mandalorian Wars and the events of the first game. If you already know this story, you can skip this Chapter 0 using the Chapters feature. Well, let's go! Remember the Mandalorians? If you've only seen the movies, then you won't have any idea what they are, let alone that Boba and Jango Fett are Mandalorians. Kinda. You'll know what they are if you've seen Clone Wars or The Mandalorian, but even there, what you've seen is little more than a dying race. The reason why the Mandalorians are so messed up is that they're still licking their wounds from a conflict nearly 4 millennia ago, the Mandalorian Wars. 3,923 years before the Phantom Menace, the Mandalorians were Saiyans on steroids, a warrior race that cares only about conflict, not as a means to an end, but as the end itself. The average Mandalorian held an extremely idealized view of war, seeing it as the ultimate test for both the individual and the group. This reached its peak with Mandalore the Ultimate, who decided that the Mandalorians had amassed enough power to conquer the galaxy, and they proceeded to do so as if it were a contest to prove they had a bigger dick than the Republic, with whom they went to war when they set out to conquer its territory. The Mandalorians crushed every foe they encountered. It became clear that without the support of the Jedi, the Republic would quickly fall, leaving behind half-dead worlds from the unbound destruction of the Mandalorian offensives. And yet, the Jedi refused to help. George Lucas wanted to show with the prequels how people or an institution can be well-intentioned but end up causing more harm than good. The prequel-era Jedi are kind and embody a great, deep pacifist philosophy, but they had fallen into apathy and arrogance. Eventually, the Jedi became bad teachers who didn't properly represent their great philosophy, for example, confusing emotional control with emotional repression, two very different things, leading them, at times, to treat love as something negative. And yet, the prequel-era Jedi were 100 times better than those of this era. If you want to see Jedi being complete idiots, you've come to the right place. Getting back to the topic, the Jedi Council detected that there was something more behind this war, a dark hand pulling the strings, so they decided to wait for this evil to manifest, abandoning both civilians and Republic soldiers to their deaths. Of course, since the Jedi considered themselves guardians of peace, many were appalled by this decision, and eventually 2 Jedi, Revan and Malak, led a rebellion that split the Jedi in half. Those loyal to the Council sat back and waited, while those loyal to Revan and Malak joined the Republic to defeat the Mandalorians. The war was extreme. One of the battles on Onderon 3 was so intense that the entire planet ended up in flames. Weapons of mass destruction were used, and in the end, the use of one of these weapons on Malachor V caused countless deaths. The remaining Jedi on the field were sacrificed to slaughter countless Mandalorians. So many died that the Mandalorians acknowledged Revan's superiority and withdrew, bringing the conflict to an end. In fact, the war was so extreme that the soldiers, both from the Republic and the surviving Jedi, were scarred and traumatized by what they had seen and done. This trauma turned into rage and resentment towards all those Jedi who stood by and watched as others suffered, killed, and died. Revan and Malak were no exception. They fell to the dark side, transformed their Jedi and soldiers into a Sith empire with the intent of massacring the Jedi and conquering the galaxy, since both they and the Republic had proven incapable of defending the innocent. Of course, the Jedi said, "Look, red lightsabers! These guys we can fight!" And so immediately after the end of the Mandalorian Wars, the Jedi Civil War began, named so because the new Sith Empire was formed by former Jedi. But this war was different. Revan wasn't like the Mandalorians. He was intelligent, calculating, and aware that if you conquer territory, it's in your best interest to have the conquered people on your side. Revan did not inflict unnecessary damage, avoided civilian suffering, and devised strategies to end battles swiftly rather than engaging in direct conflicts with casualties on both sides. Revan was far more intelligent and careful than the Republic and the Jedi. Ordinary people saw him as the one who had saved them from the Mandalorians and who would truly protect them, not the Republic. Many planets were on Revan's side. It may have been during this brief period that the Sith were most popular among the general population. But this only lasted a little while. Driven by their lust for power, the Sith always end up betraying one another. Malak wanted to prove his superiority through brute force. He resented having to obey the smarter Revan, so one day, while Revan was facing several Jedi on his ship, Malak opened fire on his former ally, killing him. Under Malak's reign, the Sith Empire became exactly what you'd expect. A group of ruthless assassins and sadists, like the Empire in the movies, but with Force users thrown in. And it's precisely when Malak begins inflicting terrible suffering on everyone who opposes him that the first game begins. Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic. In that famous role-playing game, you control a member of the Republic whose ship is attacked by the Sith Empire and ends up stranded on Taris, a planet dominated by the Sith. Accompanied by Karth Onasi, who is basically a proto-Kaden from Mass Effect, you must rescue the Jedi who led the charge against Revan, Bastila Shan. After rescuing her, she sees that you are Force sensitive, so when you escape Taris and take her back to the Jedi Temple on Dantooine, you are trained, demonstrating great potential to become a Jedi. The Council sees so much potential in you that it entrusts you, Bastila, and the friends you've made along the way to follow Revan's footsteps. He was searching for a mysterious weapon called the Starforge, and to find it before Malak. Part of why this game is so fondly remembered is because of an iconic plot twist that completely changes its story. When we meet Darth Malak, he reveals that we're not some random person who happens to be super powerful in the Force. We are Darth Revan. Revan didn't die when Malak fired on his ship, he was merely wounded and fell unconscious. Bastila and her team brought Revan before the Jedi Council, who used the Force to strip us of our identity and replace it with a fake one. We were on that ship so that Bastila could gradually convince us to become a Jedi, making sure we regain our power without falling to the dark side. The Jedi manipulated you. They devised a plan to turn their greatest enemy into their greatest ally. This revelation begins the final hours of the game, the most iconic ones. Malak bombards Dantooine, killing countless Jedi, kidnaps Bastila, and manages to manipulate her into switching sides and becoming a Sith. You must confront her, even kill her if you haven't improved your relationship with her, and defeat Malak. Or you can say you're fed up with the Jedi, so fuck 'em! Revert to being Darth Revan and kill Malak to reclaim your empire before destroying both the Jedi and the Republic. A surprisingly satisfying evil ending. It's undeniable that KOTOR 1 does several things much better than KOTOR 2, especially in terms of dungeon exploration and variety. There were even parts where you had to investigate a crime or participate in trials, all very well thought out and original. Despite this, in general, the game is far inferior to its sequel, both in terms of gameplay and, above all, narrative. Yes, the characters are cool, and yes, there are good moments, but apart from its plot twist, it's a very typical story. It introduces good ideas like Karth's son joining the Sith unaware of their evil, or how the Jedi aren't as benevolent or wise as you'd think, given how they treat both you and Bastila as tools, but it never delves into them. The game wants to be a cool adventure with a happy ending. It wants to be a new hope as a video game. KOTOR 2 set out to be The Empire Strikes Back. In a galaxy without Jedi, reduced to the echo of a war, with the Republic on the brink of collapse, struggling to salvage the disaster wrought by its own incompetence, your party members operate in shades of grey, far less archetypical. Complex themes are explored in depth, turning the Star Wars universe into a mirror to better understand the world around us. But I can't just describe the brilliance of this game. That's why I created this video. The only way to explain why Knights of the Old Republic 2 is one of the best games ever made and one of the best stories I've ever experienced is for you to join me from beginning to end of this adventure. Whether you're new to KOTOR 2 or a veteran, it's time to leave our world behind and immerse ourselves in a galaxy far, far away. Now, awaken. When we turn on the game, we're greeted by a simple menu and a Sith Lord watching us. His appearance reminds us of what was left of Darth Vader, except this man can live without a mechanical suit. Pressing New Game takes us straight to creating our character without any context of what we're about to encounter, something common in games at the time. Character creation is identical to that of the previous game. Physically, we can choose various aspects, but the interesting part comes with the gameplay. In KOTOR 1, you became a Jedi after the first world, but here you're one from the start. You have to choose between Knight, Sentinel, and Consular. The gameplay is based on Dungeons & Dragons, specifically Pathfinder 3.5. All Jedi are like a blend of fighter, wizard, and rogue, but each class prioritizes one of these aspects. The Knight prioritizes the fighting, focusing on dishing out and taking hits and gaining damage bonuses. Its most iconic ability lets you leap to melee range of any enemy, no matter how far away. The Sentinel prioritizes the rogue, granting bonuses to stealth, and is the class that lets you allocate the most points to your skills. Finally, the Consular is the wizard. All of its bonuses will enhance your force powers and how often you can use them. Then, you must select your stats. If you've played Dungeons & Dragons, you already know them, but there are a couple of differences. Strength, dexterity, and constitution act exactly as they do in D&D. Intelligence determines how many skill points you get per level, so it's worth putting a point or two into it. Wisdom is your force, though it also influences your perception and healing abilities. Plus, if your character is male, I greatly recommend leveling up Wisdom. I'd explain why, but I think it's funnier if I keep it to myself for now. And finally, Charisma. Since dialogues here are resolved with your skills, particularly Persuasion, Charisma slightly influences other things, such as the power of the Force, particularly Force Healing and your allies' accuracy. And after these stats, you have to assign points to your skills. There are 8: Computers, Demolition, Stealth, Perception, Persuasion, Repair, Security, and Treat Wounds. They're really not that important. The only one that's key is Persuasion, since only you can use it. Look, it's cool, and like in Fallout New Vegas, having a high skill unlocks new dialogue options, but it's nowhere near as important as it was in that game. Here, you'll miss out on something every now and then, but 98% of your experience will be the same, especially since for things like demolitions, stealth, etc., you can let your allies handle them. In fact, it's advisable to let each ally specialize in 2 or 3 skills and ignore them yourself. It may seem like this character creation process is long and complex, but we really haven't done much. Yes, your class and stats are important, but the true customization, not just for you but for all the characters, will come with leveling up. At each level, you'll acquire new feats and powers and improve your skills. Now that we have our new protagonist, it's time to start the game once and for all. We begin in a critical situation. Our recently created character and a strange old woman find themselves aboard the previous game's ship, the Ebon Hawk, adrift in space, with T3-M4 as the only one capable of doing anything. This is a tutorial on the exploration mechanics. Technically, it's not worth doing if you've already played this game or its first installment, but it's a great training exercise in a well-designed atmospheric environment. If you've played the first game, as you move from one place to another, fixing the ship under the emergency lights, you might find yourself asking several questions. How did our protagonist end up here? And if T3 is here, where are Revan and HK-47? It's plausible to think that each member of the group would go their own way after defeating Malak, but the droids belong to Revan. The answers will have to wait, because all we can do for now is watch as T3 heads to the only place this half-red ship can reach, the Peragus mining station.
Awaken.
A voice wakes us up from medical anesthesia. We find ourselves in an unknown place, surrounded by poisoned corpses. This is where we take our first steps. The controls may seem a bit awkward, but you get used to them quickly. We also put our skills to use immediately, since our only option at the moment is to use the computer to open the door to the morgue. If we have points in computers, we can open a first aid kit, and if we have points in medicine, we can craft one ourselves at the chemistry table. In the morgue, we find a plasma torch that we'll use to unlock the doors, but one of the corpses turns out to be not quite so dead. The old woman introduces herself as Kreia. She's a Jedi and says you are too, but you are disconnected from the Force. In this type of role-playing game, the protagonist is usually a blank slate, partially so you can give them a personality yourself or to justify starting an adventure at level 1. Geralt of Rivia suffered from amnesia in his first game, and Bethesda's protagonists had lives so insignificant that it didn't matter what they were like before their adventures. But our protagonist, the Exile, had a life and a history before the events of this game. For now though, there's no time to discuss it. We need to figure out how to escape this place full of death. Beyond the doors, we face our first battles against hostile droids. Although it's fun, KOTOR's combat isn't the game's strongest point, especially so early on. Like in most RPGs, we start with virtually no abilities, we can only attack. By the way, when you see this guy, you're watching my second to last playthrough of the game, which I recorded a while ago and did pretty badly, mostly because I skipped a lot of dialogue, I read fast and I'm impatient. When you see someone else, male or female, since there's content in this game that changes depending on your gender, I've picked up someone else's playthrough, okay? Okay. A little further on, we come across Adam Rand, who survived whatever happened here because he was imprisoned. The only useful thing he seems to know is that there's a reward for handing over a Jedi to an organization called the Exchange, and that the arrival of an unconscious Jedi at the station sparked chaos among the workers, eager to claim the bounty. When Adam realizes you're that Jedi, the conversation turns to Revan and the ending of KOTOR 1. When you make a game with multiple endings, it's hard to create a sequel that respects each and every one of those alternate paths. At best, it's done like in Mass Effect, where the saved data from the previous game is used, but back then no one knew how to do that. To resolve this dilemma, KOTOR does something very clever. In this conversation, Adam mentions the protagonist of the first game, Revan, and we're given the opportunity to respond. The possible responses refer to whether Revan was good or evil, and male or female, thus shaping the ending of the previous game. If we say that Revan was evil, we'll later find a message from Bastila in the Sith world, but let's say it was like in the canon ending. Revan was a man who returned to the Jedi, saved Bastila and defeated Malak, ending the Jedi Civil War. However, no matter which ending we choose, Revan began to recover from his amnesia and remembered something very important that drove him to head to the unknown regions alone, and he hasn't returned since. For fans of the first game, this is a very important mystery. What did our protagonist from the first game remember, and where is he? Through these conversations, we gradually learn more about our character as well. He fought in the Mandalorian Wars, an experience that proved very traumatic. He didn't become a Sith like the other Jedi who followed Revan, but for some reason, he lost his connection to the Force, which is why he's back at level 1. He was exiled by the Jedi and spent years as a pilgrim, until he was captured and ended up at this station. With Adam's help, we access the comms, but we only manage to contact T3, who agrees to help us. We take control of it, and although there's nothing wrong with this section, it's somewhat unnecessary. You'll see that I'll say that a lot about Peragus. It's the usual criticism of this level. It's not bad, but it's unnecessarily long, with many superfluous areas. Well, T3 only manages to open the door to the mines before being attacked by a mysterious villain, so we're back to the exile. In the mines, things are starting to get interesting. Despite having our connection to the Force forcibly severed, the current conflict is reawakening our power, represented by leveling up. One by one, we gain more health, a couple of abilities and force powers, and we start to find equipment like shields and grenades. We also begin using our other skills, demolitions to disarm mines or stealth to catch our enemies by surprise, although I stick to the old strategy of charging forward and beating the crap out of everything I see. But don't be like me all the time. For example, in this area, you can avoid all combat if you use the computer to cancel the droid's commands. How strange. They were programmed to use their mining protocols on humans, which means they were programmed to attack. Between this and the fact that the wounded were later poisoned, it's clear that someone is sabotaging this station. That someone is actually more of a something. We run into HK-50, a protocol droid. Well, that's what he claims to be, but obviously he's an assassin droid who intends to hand us over to the Exchange. I can't express with words how proud this droid is of its actions that have led to the deaths of hundreds of workers, so just listen to it for a second.
Defensive answer, Master. I am a protocol droid, not a well-crafted assassination droid of unrivaled sophistication. To have carried out the actions that took place here would have required an unusual set of skills. It is highly unlikely I possess the knowledge of how to reprogram the memory cores of base worker-class droids into killing machines, let alone to terminate the organics at this facility, utilizing only Aerotech 500 series laser mining drills and explosives fashioned from proton missile cores.
Even if we tell him to his face that he's clearly a killer droid, he just laughs at us. This conversation is the game's first piece of truly well-written dialogue, and it's the first hint that this game is special. A locked door prevents us from continuing. It can only be opened with a voice command, but we get the solution from HK-50's own pride, as he can't resist gloating about the misfortunes he's caused by imitating the voice of one of his victims. And by the way, I don't know who dubbed this super minor character, but they deserve an award.
5 droids, burning through the outer door. They're forcing their way into the bay. Please, someone that... Oh no, they're through! Oh, my leg! They're burning through my leg! Oh, stop!
After solving this puzzle, a ship full of Sith docks at the port, and we all know the Sith really like killing Jedi, so we grab Kreia and Aden and start running for our lives, which forces HK-50 to drop his disguise and try to stop us. This is our first boss fight, and hey, it's not bad. With 3 party members, each possessing distinct abilities, the possibilities in combat grow exponentially, and HK has 2 unique abilities: deploying mines, which must be shot or pushed with the force to prevent them from spawning on you, and self-destruction. Both mechanics teach you to stay alert. Kreia! As we flee from the Sith assassins, who are apparently worse fighters than a broken Jedi, an elderly Jedi, and a fool, we're introduced to the influence mechanic. That's right, this isn't like the first game or even like Mass Effect. Here, what you say matters, and it changes how the people you travel with perceive you. If you treat your companions well, show interest and concern, you'll gain influence with them, and if you treat them like shit, you'll lose it. Interestingly, it doesn't work the way you think. Influence starts at 50, and both raising and lowering it unlocks new dialogue and interactions with your companions. It's implied that with high influence, they open up to you because they admire and respect you, but with low influence, they hate you, yet are so afraid of you that they don't dare hide anything from you. It's a very interesting idea. Moreover, your influence affects the alignment of your allies. If you're on the dark side and charm your allies, you'll draw them to the dark side, but if you treat them poorly, you'll only reinforce their rejection of evil and they'll turn to the light side. I love this system. It's one of the best of its kind I've seen. What the fuck is that? Isn't that the guy from the title screen?
I have come for the Jedi.
This battle is mine alone. I am not defenseless.
Okay, I don't know why that level 4 grandma thinks she can take on that harbinger of the apocalypse, but there she goes. Clearly, Kreia is hiding something from us, since she knows something about the Sith called Darth Sion. Well, it's not that surprising. It's not uncommon in Star Wars to see a well-intentioned master betrayed by their apprentice. The problem is that when Kreia loses her hand, our protagonist also falls to the ground in pain. We continue with Aden, rescue T3 and 4, and begin repairing the Ebon Hawk while fending off the remaining assassins. Kreia boards at the last moment, but the Sith start pursuing us with their ships. We must choose whether to blow up all of Peragus to save ourselves, or risk our lives. Even if we choose the latter, the Sith will accidentally blow up Peragus during the chase, so all roads lead to Rome. After, as Aden so appropriately puts it, killing a planet, our group finally sits down to talk for a bit. Well, the first question is, what are the Sith doing chasing the exile? And Kreia shares something of utmost importance. The Jedi are extinct. In the previous game, Malak bombarded the Jedi Academy on Dantooine, but on top of that, the Jedi gathered on the planet Kotor to discuss their future, and were completely massacred by something. The Jedi are dead, and those Sith have come after us because, ironically, they consider the exile the last Jedi. Their failure to kill us provides the valuable information that there are Sith hidden somewhere in the galaxy, with at least one powerful Darth. Kreia also comments on why the exile's hand burned when Simon cut it off. Subconsciously, Kreia and the Exile already consider themselves master and student, and they have forged a bond in the Force. What one feels, so does the other. Kreia asks to become your official master. Her powers are weak, but she still has her wisdom and experience. You can reject this and refuse to speak with Kreia for the rest of the game, but accepting her tutelage grants you so many benefits that the right decision is obvious. Before deciding what to do about this extraordinary situation in which we've gone from being a nobody to the most important person in the galaxy, wanted by everyone for the exchange's bounty and the Sith, we land on the only planet we can, near the extinct Peragus, Telos. Telos was one of the first planets to suffer damage in the Jedi Civil War under Malach's orders. Most of the planet was bombarded, leaving it devastated. After the war, the Republic launched the Telos Restoration Project, but like all government initiatives, it isn't progressing at the pace or quality it should. Funny enough, for a video game, when we land, the local authorities are surprisingly fair, and after a quick investigation to determine whether we're responsible for the destruction of Peragus, they let us go free. But unfortunately, they're not competent, and our ship is stolen. Two distinct groups involved in the Telos restoration learn that we're a Jedi and propose that we help them in exchange for finding our ship, the Ithorians and the Zerka Corporation. The Ithorians are a highly empathetic alien race, deeply connected to nature, and they put great effort into the restoration project since they can literally feel the planet's suffering and want to heal it. In fact, in addition to finding our ship, the leader of their herd, Chodo Habet, can sense the wound in our character's Force signature and will try to heal it in exchange for our help. On the other hand, we have the Zerka Corporation. They already appeared in the previous game as a company so comically evil that they're practically a satire, and they maintain that status in this sequel. They're selfish, greedy thugs who throw obstacles in the Ithorians' way to fill their own pockets, and when you question them, they say they're doing it for the good of the Republic, because the project is too high a price for a nearly dead planet, when many other planets could be helped for far less money. Wait a minute, that's true. It's true. Speaking with many characters, they tell us that the amount of money and effort required to save Telos is absurd, that its restoration is more symbolic than physical, and that Telos should be left to die to help the other planets suffering from the echoes of war. But don't be fooled. Don't let the forest stop you from seeing the trees. Even if this was entirely correct, Zerka is only using it as an excuse to downplay its crimes of obstruction, fraud, and murder. The decision to work with the Ithorians or Zerka is the game's first moral choice. The Ithorians represent the light side of the Force, and Zerka the dark side. Every time we look at our characters in the menu, we see their alignment. The more good or evil we are, the more powerful we become. For better or worse, this means that if we want to be really strong in combat, we have to be either the second coming of Jesus Christ or the biggest son of a bitch who ever lived, one of the game's few poorly designed mechanics given its narrative. But let's leave that debate for later. For now, we're going to be good guys and work with the Ithorians. This consists of a couple of errands. The most interesting one is to snatch one of Zerka's droids and reprogram it to obey us and access the company's private data, which we'll use as evidence to expose their corruption. First, it's interesting because to access its programming we need the permit of the engineer who created it, but he won't help us as long as he's in debt. We can pay off his debt, threaten him, or kill him and take the permit. If we decide to kill him, our companions have curious reactions. Aaron complains about the shock and the violence, but he seems to admire how we use our power to get what we want. Kreia is much more negative, criticizing the psychopathy of killing when we could have achieved the same with threats alone. This criticism isn't very Jedi-like. She has no problem with us threatening the engineer with death. Her issue is actually killing him, because she sees that as a sign that we aren't thinking about our actions and their consequences. After completing a couple of errands, things turn around, because the Jedi, Kreia, who seems like the good companion, says she doesn't like the alliance with the Ithorians, arguing that Habet has an agenda and is manipulating us to fulfill it, while Adan, who seems like the evil companion, criticizes us if we ally with Zerka, aware that we're getting into a very shady world and that the reward might not be worth it. As it turns out, our companions are far more complex than they might seem at first glance. Kreia obviously knows more than she lets on, but Adan might deceive you. He's much more than your typical Han Solo. This ties in perfectly with the influence I mentioned earlier. It doesn't just change when you interact with them. Sometimes what you do while playing causes your allies to react positively or negatively. There are 3 types of actions that can provoke a reaction: good, psychotic, and cunning. Aten admires kindness, but he's also aware of how having power can protect you from the world. So both good and psychotic actions increase your influence over him, making him one of the easiest characters to influence. The fact that Aten likes to see us behave both like the second coming of Jesus Christ and like a murderous monster is a hint of the emotional mess he's in, which we'll see in the future. Kreia is even more interesting. Kreia hates both good and psychotic actions, but she loves cunning ones. I'm not going to bother trying to explain it because she explains it herself later on, so for now we'll just leave it at that. To end this whole questline, we must meet with the local exchange leader, Lupak, and convince him to leave the Ithorians alone. The guard won't let us in. If you're playing Darkside, I recommend trying to force him, since the poor guy just says, "Even if you kill me, the doors open from the inside," and you can reply, "Then I'll kill you." After, when you come back, there's another guard who says, "Oh, this job is so dangerous. They say the previous guard was murdered," to which you can respond, "Yeah, what a shame. By the way, it was me, and I'll kill you too!" This game doesn't have as much Darkside humor as its predecessor, but every now and then there's something. We form an alliance with one of the exchange members, Lucia, who wants to overthrow Lupak. When we all meet in the same place, we see that this game isn't one where things can be resolved through dialogue. Both Lucia and Lupak want to capture us to claim the bounty, demonstrating their incompetence since they want us alive, but believe they'll still get paid even if they deliver us dead. No matter what we do, we can only ally with one of them temporarily, and we'll have to take out both of them to get out of here alive. Adan emphasizes how screwed we are. As long as the bounty on our head exists, we'll be constantly harassed by the worst of the worst. At least, with Lupak dead, we finally get a clue about where our ship is, on a distant mountain. The Ithorians are preparing transport to take us there. Just as we're about to board, we receive a call. Zerka is launching one last attack on the Ithorians as revenge for exposing their corruption. Normally, you'd turn around and stop them in a short combat sequence, but you can just leave. I've never done it because it's such a dick move, but it cracks me up that even at the end of the good route, you can abandon your supposed allies to their fate. And, before I forget, not only was Adan right with his criticisms, but to some extent, so was Kreia. Remember the promise Chozo had made to try to heal our wound in the Force? Well, he tries and fails immediately. All he does is increase our force by 15 points, an insignificant boost. He's well intentioned, but as Kreia said, we've done far more for him than he's done for us, and if we keep giving more than we receive, we'll end up in a bad place. But hey, at least he came through on the ship, so let's head up and continue the adventure. During the journey, those Zerka sons of bitches shoot down our transport, so we'll have to find another vehicle at their base to reach the Ebon Hawk. It's no wonder so many people find the beginning of the game unbearable. Not only is Peragus way too long for what it is, but Telos also has a long stretch that feels like filler. It isn't, but sure feels like it. Fortunately, we're rescued by an engineer named Beodor. Here's something I mentioned when we first met Adan. This game did something unique in its genre. The protagonist had a life and a backstory before we started controlling them. It turns out we already know Beodor. He was under our command during the Mandalorian Wars. Despite being of the same race as Darth Maul, he couldn't be more different. He calls us General out of habit and treats us with the utmost respect. He speaks in a very low voice with a dry, laconic sense of humor, but with a clear, contained anger that we can detect when he talks about Zerka. It seems that Beodor is trying to save Telos as a personal redemption for what he did during the war, but for now we don't get any more details. Although we won't be talking to Beodor anymore for now, it's very clever to introduce the concept of a character our protagonist knows but the player doesn't, since we'll soon have a much more intense and complex version of this concept. We have to bring Beodor along in the party during this section, so either Adan or Kreia has to stay behind. Although I really like Adan, I'm kicking him out of the party because I'm not leveling him up. And why am I not leveling him up? That's a surprise too, that'll help us later. The first half of this section is the most satisfying. For the first time, we're in an open, natural space, exploring the forest and even a beach at one point. We fight both Beasts and Zerka goons who use droids, mines, and shields to try to stop us, all while Beodor speaks to us from time to time, establishing his calm yet determined personality, ready to do anything to stop the scum threatening the planet. Unfortunately, the second half of this section is much worse, because we have to enter the Zerka base. Once again, we find ourselves exploring an uninteresting indoor area while killing multiple enemies, as if we hadn't spent almost all of Peragus and a decent chunk of Telos doing the exact same thing. Seriously, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing here, there's even a mini-boss mech, it's just that the game falls into excessive repetition and overuses simple designs for dungeons. It's also here that Beodor explains his unique mechanic. His bionic fist has a system that allows him to disable any shield with a single punch. Not many enemies are smart enough to use shields, but it can be really useful, especially early in the game when we're not doing much damage yet. And to top it all off, this game, being so complex, has several oddities and a fair number of bugs, but nothing has ever gotten on my nerves as much as this one, where a guy asks you to escort him to the exit. If you want influence with Beodor, you'll want to do it since it's your first time to get some, but the guy isn't just slow as molasses, he gets stuck everywhere, and sometimes you reach the exit only for him to stand there like a dumbass, preventing you from completing this mini task. I hate this guy. After completing this section, we get another transport and finally reach our objective, the location of the Ebon Hawk, but we only see mountains before they shoot us down. Again! This time it wasn't Zerka, but more HK-50 droids that were following us. The battle against the HK-50 on Peragus was probably easy, but don't underestimate them. These three are quite strong at this point in the game, and if you're not careful, they can kill you pretty easily. After defeating them, we seek refuge from the cold and find a sort of Jedi Academy hidden deep within the mountains. Some women appear and demand that we drop our weapons. Kreia advises us to obey. Adan and her are sent to cells, where, in case it wasn't clear yet, it's revealed that the two of them are hiding big secrets from the exile. Adan shows fear of the Jedi, which leads Kreia to suspect him and use the Force to read his mind, displaying a command of the Force far greater than she shows us. She forces Adan to cooperate with the group. If he doesn't, she'll reveal his secret to us. We still don't know what it is, but she calls him Assassin, with his name in quotation marks, so it's clear he killed someone and that Adan ran is a false name. But what's really important is happening to us. I mentioned earlier that it was clever to introduce us to Beodor to establish the concept of a character the exile knows, but we don't. It turns out that the Jedi hiding here is Atris, a former Jedi companion of ours who made the opposite choice. She stayed with the Jedi, even becoming a member of the Council while we went off to war, earning her hatred. This conversation is brilliant, so I'm going to let it play out.
I did not expect to see you again after the day of your sentencing. I thought you had taken the exile's path, wandering the galaxy. Yet you have returned. Why?
It was not my intention to come here, Atris, or see you again.
Yet here you are. Perhaps you do not know yourself as well as you think. Regardless, your arrival here begs an explanation. Have you come to face the judgment of the Council, as you did so many years ago? Are you finally willing to admit that we were right to cast you out?
I could not stand by and allow innocents to die in the Outer Rim.
So you said, so long ago. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. You sought adventure. You hungered for battle. You could not wait to follow Revan to war. The Jedi Order asked only for time to examine the Mandalorian threat. They urged caution, patience, and you defied them. So when you returned, you were brought before us. You were a Jedi no longer, and so you were exiled.
I also recall you wished me imprisoned, or worse.
There was much about that day that was difficult to forget. Your words, your defiance, and when you stabbed your lightsaber into the center stone. So I would never forget.
That's my lightsaber!
Indeed. A lightsaber is the mark of a Jedi. When you turned your back on the Order, it was not yours anymore. I have always kept it, as a reminder of what can happen when your passions dictate your actions. I have kept it, so I would never forget your arrogance or your insult to the Order.
Insult to the Order? You insult me by carrying it!
Then you misunderstand its meaning while it is in my possession, and what it now represents. But I am not unsympathetic to your feelings. Leaving the Order must have been difficult for you. Yet you gave the Council no other choice. You gave me no other choice.
I went to war to protect others, not for battle.
So your choice was to meet the aggression of the Mandalorians with more aggression. That is not the Jedi way.
Is the Jedi way to let people be massacred?
Every choice we make, whether we know it or not, sends echoes through the Force. It can awaken feelings, ignite passions, hate, anger, fear, where none existed before. By meeting aggression, by serving as an opponent against which the Mandalorians could test themselves, you fed their hate, their lust for war, and it sent a terrible echo through you. And because of it, you and those Jedi who met them on the battlefield lost their way, and you turned on us.
Revan and Malak turned on you, not I.
Without you and the other fallen Jedi to support them, to feed their lust for war, Revan and Malak's crusade would have been over before it began.
If the Jedi had backed us, there never would have been a civil war.
You betrayed the Jedi teachings. All that you had been taught you threw at your feet, crushed them beneath your heel. The Jedi teachings require we examine our actions. Acting without reflection is not our way.
Hesitation and passivity are also strong emotions, ones we should guard against.
There was no guarantee that marching to war would have saved the Outer Rim. In fact, quite the opposite.
If we had not fought, the Republic would have fallen. That is a fact.
A physical victory perhaps, but the real victory lay in...
The triumph of the Jedi teachings is a cold thing when no one is left alive to appreciate them.
You do not know...
If the Mandalorians had won, would the Jedi have fought then? Or simply meditated on what to do?
How dare you? The Mandalorian Wars should have been your grave, and Malachor V is where you should have died.
Your anger? Is it because you secretly wish you'd had the strength to follow me to war?
What? What do you mean?
I can see it in you. You wanted to fight by my side, but you were too scared to defy the Council. Absolute cinema. A debate between two people who made completely different decisions and are sticking to them. A debate that flows perfectly. Notice that at the beginning, our responses are vaguer and shorter because Atris is attacking and we're defending ourselves. But little by little, the tables turn. Our dialogues become longer and more direct as we go on the offensive and achieve victory when our arguments reveal that Atris' viewpoint comes not from facts and logic, but from emotions. Her fury doesn't come from us doing something wrong for the galaxy. It comes from suspecting that we did the right thing, that the Jedi were wrong. But that thought is so horrifying to her that she refuses to accept it and tries to banish it from her mind with rage, rejecting everything, including us. And that's just assuming you choose these lines, because there are multiple ways this conversation can go. You can try to debate with her but present weak arguments and thus she wins. You can roleplay that your character expresses regret for going to war and now believes the Council was right. Or you can roleplay that you found your true self in the war, either as a warring protector or as a Sith. You can even refuse to speak and this conversation becomes, "You fucking bitch, you disgust me. You're the one who's disgusting, you shithead, get out of here. I'm leaving if you give me back my ship, asshole." Well, there it is. Get out of here. I don't want to see you again, you idiot. Relax, I don't want to see your face either. Slut! Oh, speaking of that, Atris stole our ship to investigate it, because it's the ship that destroyed Peragus. When you tell her that the Sith destroyed Peragus, Atris believes you. She might be opposed to your actions and have her head stuck up her ass, but she's a Jedi and knows you wouldn't lie about something so important. She suspects that these Sith are the hidden darkness that manipulated the Mandalorian Wars, so she assigns us a mission: find the other Jedi Council members who, after the Civil War, went into hiding on various planets. With these Jedi by our side, we can devise a plan and destroy the Sith once and for all. She allows us to explore the Academy freely. There isn't much to see besides talking to the Handmaidens. Atris is more than just a Jedi. She is a historian, responsible for maintaining and preserving Jedi knowledge. These maidens are her assistants. The reason they're identical is because they're all sisters and Echani, a human sub-race specialized in understanding the world through combat. They are identical because among the Echani, men always look exactly like their father and women like their mother. However, one of them, the one not wearing a hood, isn't identical to the others. She shares a father with her sisters, but not a mother. This leads her to suffer great contempt. In fact, you can challenge the Handmaidens to combat and they'll gradually raise the stakes to test your limits, eventually fighting you all at once. except for the handmaiden with a different mother, since she's so out of sync with her sisters that they say she'd make the fight easier for us. This poor woman is clearly having a hard time, and because of this rejection, she wonders things her sisters don't. She asks us what it's like to feel the Force, and all the possible answers are beautiful. My favorites are, it's like a river, whose current touches everything and carries you everywhere. It's like feeling the sunlight, but without the intensity, just the warmth. And it's like waking up one day and realizing you can hear the heartbeat of the universe. This game treats the Force not as a superpower, a mistake many Star Wars creators fall into, but as Obi-Wan and Yoda describe it in the original films and as Luke treats it in Episode 8. Like this mystical force that resides in everything and everyone, connecting us all to everything and everyone. When we go to release our companions out of prison, one of the handmaidens warns us to be careful with Adan, since they could tell from his stance that he knows Eshani martial arts. We've just seen with Kreia that Adan is hiding who he is, but this is the first time our character is aware of it. After freeing them, we ask Adan, who responds evasively. We can try to persuade him, but it's a trap. Normally, in games like this, when there's a special interaction, it's always better than a normal one. Trying to interrogate Adan will make him angry with us. The more intense we try to be, the more resistance we'll encounter, especially if we try to use the Force to enter his mind. We can let it go or even apologize, but if we use the Force, Adan gets really angry and reveals part of why he hates the Jedi. The idea of being able to enter someone else's mind to extract the information or even control their actions is terrifying if you stop to think about it, but the Jedi don't seem aware of how traumatic this can be for the victim, demonstrating one of their greatest flaws: their lack of understanding and detachment from the people they're supposed to protect. Doing this to Adan reinforces his fear of the Jedi and will drastically lower our influence with him. We also free T3M4, who had been taken alongside the ship, poor thing, and we finally return to our Ebon Hawk. There, the faithful droid reveals that during his captivity, he managed to steal several files from Atris, the most important being the recording of our exile, which contains what the Council said after we left. Our protagonist believed that the Jedi themselves had stripped him of the Force, but this confirms that isn't the case. The Council knew why we lost it, but refused to tell us. Brilliantly, the game combines a typical mission with a personal one. We must find and reunite the Jedi Council to join forces against the Sith and save the galaxy, sure, but we also want to find them to discover why we lost the Force and why we're slowly regaining it. Each Jedi is located on a world that will serve as the game's next levels. Vrook on Dantooine, Kes Khalil on Nar Shadda, Kevar on Onderon, and Vash on Korriban. I think this is the only Star Wars game where we don't visit any of the typical planets. Thank the Force we won't have to go back to fucking Tatooine or get lost on Kashyyyk, which is always a shitty level, but they keep putting it in the games. However, all the planets are important and have appeared in other Star Wars worlds. Dantooine was home to the Jedi Academy in the first KOTOR. Nar Shadda is one of the galaxy's most crime-ridden worlds, appearing in Jedi Outcast. On Onderon's moon, one of the bloodiest battles of the Mandalorian Wars took place, and on Korriban, in contrast to Dantooine, stood the Sith Academy of the first KOTOR. One of the handmaidens, the one who is half-sister to the others, joins the group at Atris' request. It's obvious she's here to spy on us, but on an adventure as dangerous as this, rejecting potential allies will be foolish, so she's welcome to the group. And so, at last, we've finished the first act of the game, the prelude to the real adventure. We have an interesting party where most of them hate each other, a villain to face, knowing he's just one of several, a mission of personal significance to us, and 4 planets to visit. All that's left is to choose which one to go to first, and we have taken our first step towards saving the galaxy. While we're on hyperspace flying to the first world, let's walk around the ship and talk with our party. If you've played Mass Effect, you know what this is about. As you progress through the game, there will be more characters and dialogue in the ship. Returning at least once in between each level is practically mandatory. Especially because KOTOR goes one step further than Mass Effect despite being released years prior. Each character has at least 2 unique elements, an exclusive ability in battle and a service or power-up that can be given to us out of battle. Kreia is the most important. She'll take the role of your master if you let her, which you should, because if you don't, that's like shooting yourself on the foot. She's a source of lore. She'll talk about the identity of the Sith chasing us, why Revan was so successful, the failures of the Jedi and the Republic, and along etc. Every once in a while she'll prepare lessons, but right now it's too soon, so we can't do anything. During combat, the bond that you share as master and apprentice makes you share your buffs. This makes Kreia one of the best characters in your party. It sucks to use 2 or 3 force powers to buff yourself while your enemies hit you. Having her lets you enter combat immediately while she powers you up and herself at the same time. With Adan we can play Pasak, a fun card game based on blackjack, but we can bring our own cards with special properties to give it some pizzazz. In combat, Adan has an extraordinary determination that lets him resurrect automatically. In some tough levels, this skill will save the day. T3M4 doesn't have any special ability, but since he's a droid, he works with his own rules, like requiring a particular set of equipment and medpacks. But out of combat, he can craft computer spikes for us to hack computers. Besides, if we have high skills in computers and repair and influence with T3, we can repair and upgrade him, increasing his stats. If you already have these 3 things despite being practically at the beginning of the game, you can turn the small and adorable T3 in a killing machine. The Handmaiden has a small bonus to combat due to her Achani training, but the key is that she can train you. This has a double purpose. It's to strengthen you, sure, but also to understand each other. As an Achani, the Handmaiden thinks that conflict is a form of expression. After every training, there's a short dialogue. You can try to understand her and her loyalty to Atris, while she tries to understand the contradiction. According to Atris, we're a disloyal warmonger that fell to the dark side, while the Handmaiden sees a wise exile that understands the Force as something beautiful. In addition, the Handmaiden gives us one of the best abilities of the game. The first training makes us aware of how the Force moves our body. By combining martial training and the Force, we add our wisdom to our armor class. AC is the number that the enemy must reach to hit us with their attacks, so the fact that we can increase that number by 4, 5 or more for free is insane, and that's why it's better to play as a man, because the Handmaiden only joins you if you're a man. You heard right, there are 2 pairs of 2 characters that are exclusive to each other. You can only have one of each pair in your playthrough. If you play as a woman, the Handmaiden doesn't join you, another character does later on, so you can't get this power up. I don't know who agreed to this, it sounds neat, but the only thing it does is delete content from your playthrough. The other pair is better thought out, we'll get to it. We're almost done. Baeldur has a bionic arm that destroys shields. I commented it before, and out of combat he can give us shields and he offers to help us craft a new lightsaber. I don't know if you've noticed, but yeah, we've been playing for a while now, and despite being a Jedi from the very beginning, we still don't have a lightsaber. KOTOR 2 is the only game that truly gives importance to the creation of the lightsaber, in showing how difficult it is to obtain its unique pieces. Fallen Order did a cool thing, but even then you just look for a kyber crystal to repair an already existing blade. Here you have to start from the very beginning, search every piece and forge your own lightsaber. It is an experience. Last but not least, we find the broken HK-47. If we want to repair it and have it join us, we'll have to fight more HK-50s and take their parts. Those who played KOTOR 1 will be in a hurry, since HK-47 was one of the best characters from that game. With our group organized, we can finally land on the first planet, Nar Shadda. Nar Shadda is a moon of Nar Shadda controlled by the Hutts, which is basically a black hole that draws as much crime and misery as it can. After the 2 wars, a bunch of Mandalorians, mercenaries, and war veterans that had nowhere to go ended up here. Despite the futuristic aesthetic and having the highest number of people from all the planets we'll visit, this place also contains the worst quality of life. After landing, the Toydorian Quellos shows up, who demands that we park elsewhere since this spot is taken. We can handle the situation more or less discreet and politely, but we'll always end up leaving the ship here, a decision we'll sure regret. After walking a bit, a beggar asks for a few credits. We can be evasive, but he insists, forcing us into a binary choice: give him money or scare him off with aggression. Whichever choice we take, it leads us to one of the most iconic moments of the game, a lesson from Kreia, who criticizes both kindness and evil. If we give money to the beggar, she criticizes that taking the suffering and conflict from this person only serves to take their growth, even that by helping him we've only created more suffering. Immediately we see how other beggar attacks and takes his money. On the other hand, if we scare him off, Kreia criticizes how making another suffer only sinks them in darkness, and he may cause suffering to climb out. We then see how he attacks someone else to rob them. Kreia is trying to teach us to be aware of the consequences of our actions. Each choice we make creates an echo that can change the future. Even something so insignificant as giving money or not to a beggar can, little by little, step by step, bring terrible consequences. Be careful with your kind and merciful actions, lest they bring you more suffering than an iron fist. However, if you look at her words a bit deeper, you see that Kreia isn't offended by kindness nor evil. Her issue is a lack of control. For reasons we don't know yet, Kreia wants us to become more powerful, so she sees each action in a simple binary manner. But instead of thinking, is this good or bad, she thinks, is this good for you or bad for you? Whatever we do with this beggar, we don't control the situation and it has consequences. Kreia wants to eliminate consequences, eliminate possibilities. She wants us to think each situation through and choose something that doesn't weaken us, actions whose echo can't reach us. This sounds good, but if we're kind, Kreia takes it to an extreme, to never offer anything if it doesn't benefit us, to help no one since it may have negative consequences for us. I'm talking too much about a minute and a half sequence. To sum up, I want to be clear that Kreia is criticizing the behavior of the typical Jedi and Sith, of the Jedi that thinks is being kind and just, but acting without thinking nor truly understanding the world around them only causes more suffering, and of the Sith, whose obsession with power, in particular the one obtained through violence, leads them to provoke chaos without a true benefit. And Kreia, like a good teacher, wants us to obey her, but she gives the same value or even more to just listen to her. If we're stubborn and insist that we'll continue helping or hurting everyone, we'll lose influence with her, but if we listen even as we disobey, we'll gain influence. The only way to truly lose influence with Kreia is not to reject her lesson, but to refuse to even listen to it. Well, as we get into Nar Shadda, it's a shame that I've chosen this world as the first because it's precisely the most different, but it was for a reason. Usually we encounter the main quest immediately so we know what to do to find the lost Jedi, but that's not the case here. We have no choice but to run around the planet making side quests. On one hand, we're looking for Keskalil. On another, we want to speak with the mysterious Goto, the crime lord that arranged the bounty we're being chased for. Precisely in Nar Shadda, there are dozens of bounty hunters around. We'll see them as we explore and complete missions, stalking, waiting for the right moment to strike. In particular, two sadist Twi'lek twins, a young woman named Mira, and a mad Wookiee named Hanghar. There are several good side quests. I want to highlight two types. First, there's a refugee area that's having a bad time, choked by the demands of two groups, Sirocco mercenaries that can be easily convinced to leave them alone without violence, and the exchange itself, here controlled by Sackwedge, who you'll probably kill because that asshole is in another side quest that involves rescuing a little girl he intends to sell. Almost all the side quests of the planet involve being a hero to those in need or a monster that further abuses them. You can encounter someone being attacked by members of the exchange and respond with one of the funniest interactions of the game, using a mind trick to convince these mooks to jump off the area, with one of them even saying, "Of course, if I jump it'll take me less time to get to the ground." You can also be very, very evil. In KOTOR 1, being evil was usually dark comedy and not much else except the ending, but here you can be a real son of a bitch even to the members of your party. You can sell T3 to a vendor that clearly mistreats his droids. This planet is probably the one that will lock in your alignment in the Force by giving you so many chances to be a saint or a monster. I guess that's why they put Kreia's lesson at the beginning. The second type of quest I want to highlight is that there's a recurring theme of droids acting in strange ways. In particular, there's a Bith, those guys from the cantina in episode 4. Turns out they're good musicians because they can hear certain frequencies, and there's a strange frequency all over the planet that he can't get out of his head. When we try to find the source of this frequency, his assistant droid murders him. All this is left unresolved for now, but remember it, since it leads to one of the game's best twists. Eventually, we return to the central area of the planet, where we see how, indeed, parking the ship without permission might have been a terrible idea, since it was a private parking spot for the Red Sun. a group of slavers that boards the Ebon Hawk and orders our death. But hey, this gives us the chance to kill them all! This sequence is one of the toughest in the game. It happens suddenly, so it may find you with an inadequate party for combat. There's a lot of enemies, especially when you enter the ship and find yourself surrounded. The boss isn't tough to kill, but he takes more punishment than you might expect, and if you start the fight with a small chunk of health due to all the damage you took from his small army, he might kill you. But the worst is yet to come. Look, since leaving Telos, there's an event that triggers once your alignment with the light or dark side reaches a certain threshold. If you choose to go first on Nar Shadda, you'll reach that threshold with the multiple choices of the side quest. The next time you return to the ship, you will be attacked by a Sith. Since I'm unlucky as fuck, I activated the event right after the Red Sun attacked, so I go from one tough fight to another. This is the first duel of our adventure. Since this is Star Wars, there will be several one-on-one lightsaber duels. Honestly, I get that they seek the aesthetic of the great individual personal duel, but this system is meant for a party of 3. It's like Final Fantasy, there are rarely one-on-one fights because the game's not thought out for that. I haven't talked about the gameplay for a while since this game is more about building your characters than the fight itself. You can gather multiple force powers, lightsaber styles that have passive effects, different types of hits, use grenades and shields, and all of this taking into account that you have 3 characters. You could have a Jedi that hits hard and that's it, another that buffs and heals, and a rogue with a crit build. It's not an amazing system, it's kind of a mix between Final Fantasy XII and D&D. There will be a time where the fights get repetitive, but it's more than enough for this game. What it's not enough for is the one-on-ones. The team synergy, the variety of possibilities, all crowd control techniques, all of that is lost on these duels and end up being the least satisfying fights in the game. Especially now that we're still low level and don't even have a lightsaber, but still we win the fight. We break the assassin's lightsaber and she surrenders. She asks for death, but whether for mercy, to question her, or to turn her into our slave, we let her live. Adam tells us she's a Miraluka, a blind species but very sensitive to the Force, who resort to it to sense their surroundings, which gives them a unique philosophy. Since we spared her life, Visas joins our group, swears loyalty, and tells us a bunch of things. Her master, Darth Nihilus, another of the hidden Sith, sensed our presence and sent her to take us down before we become a threat, but Visas also came here for another reason. She senses that the nature of our Force is different and has great curiosity, continuing the mystery of why we lost the Force and why we're recovering it little by little. Yet ours is nothing compared to the nature of Darth Nihilus' Force. This Sith is famous among fans for being Star Wars equivalent to Galactus. Nihilus has left his body and soul behind. He's now a black hole of Force that must devour it to survive. He has a cosmic hunger that forces him to eat entire planets. This abomination is the first thing I think when I remember Episode 4, where Vader says that the Death Star is nothing compared to the power of the Force. In fact, remember how at the beginning of all this I said the Jedi were extinguished? That was because after the Jedi Civil War, most gathered in Kotor, the Miraluka's planet. Darth Nihilus, seeing so many Force users together, like a kid on a candy store, destroyed everything and everyone except Visas, who he took as his apprentice. The few Jedi that didn't go to Kotor were left shocked and terrified. From their point of view, many of the best and most powerful Jedi met on a planet, and few minutes later, most had disappeared without leaving the smallest trace of their essence. The entire planet wrecked, more dead than alive. After Exar Kun, after the Mandalorians, after Revan and Malak, then the 99% of Jedi that were left are decisively murdered by an unknown entity? No wonder most of the masters that were left chose to hide. When Visas falls, we take a piece from her broken lightsaber. With this, plus one more from the Ithorians in Telos, we need just one more to finally craft our own lightsaber. Usually, we'd have to complete an entire planet to find that piece, but that's why we went to Nar Shadda first, since we can plan a heist where it's guaranteed to find the last piece. One of these moon's criminals is, couldn't have been any other way, a Hutt, Boga. Turns out that he lives right beside a chamber full of his riches, and you can plan to get in without him noticing. No one can enter because himself and his dogs watch it. If we buy sedatives and put them in the dog's food, we're halfway done, but we need to knock out Boga as well. Turns out, like Jabba, he likes ladies in bikini and usually falls asleep after watching one dance for him. So if you play as a woman, you dance. If you play as a man, the handmaiden has no issue doing it. With everyone sound asleep, you can break into the chamber and take, among other things, the third and final part needed to craft our lightsaber. We return to the ship and, with Beodor's help, we create our lightsaber. There's no grand cinematic, it's not a huge moment in the story. In fact, nothing stops you from not doing this and completing the entire game without a lightsaber. But the fact that you spend so long being an unarmed Jedi and have to make the effort of searching for the pieces makes this a very special moment. I've never felt so connected to a lightsaber precisely because I felt its absence and the adventure of collecting its pieces step by step. This game is the best. And since we're talking about how awesome this game is, when we pass through the refugee area, two Twi'leks stop us. They warn us that they know the man accompanying us, Adon, and that he isn't who he says he is. This finally allows us to confront Adon and have a very intense conversation. Adon has no desire to tell us about his past, partially out of shame, partially out of fear. He'll close up 3 times, each requiring higher influence to get him to talk, so you might start the conversation only to hit a wall and have to continue it later once you've increased his influence. But I've played this game before and I'm prepared. Adon ended up on Nar Shadda in the past because, contrary to his laid-back Han Solo image, he was a soldier, both in the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War, and a very loyal one. He developed genuine hatred for the Mandalorians, who had caused so much suffering, and was one of the many who ended up with deep resentment toward the Jedi who hadn't helped and the useless Republic, and joined Revan. But there came a point when his story ceased to be that of an average soldier in Revan's empire. It turned out that he had an instinctive knack for subterfuge and mental strength. He could infiltrate any situation, and the Jedi didn't detect his thoughts until it was too late. Adon was perfect to be an assassin, and that's what he became. Our companion was a man who assassinated Jedi intelligently. Instead of trying to defeat them in duels or through warfare, he attacked them from behind, used poisons, and threatened civilians to distract them. All possible because Adon projected a false image of a foolish, perverted role, a mask so powerful that no Jedi could glimpse the truth. If you recall, Adon is so good at this that he was by the side of the highly intelligent and powerful Kreia for hours, if not days, and she only discovers him at the end of Telos. In Adon's fury, we see another reason why the Jedi fell. They were so detached from ordinary people that the latter barely see any difference between Jedi and Sith, largely because most Sith are Jedi who fall to the dark side. Normal people just see some idiots fighting over religion and abstract spiritual matters while they suffer wars and death. The problems began when Adon was ordered to capture Jedi alive. Revan wanted living Jedi to torture them, make them fall to the dark side, and turn them into loyal members of his empire. One day, Adon captured a Jedi, but while he was torturing her, she managed to break through his mental barriers and reveal the painful truth to him. The reason why Adon was able to do all this is because he's Force sensitive. Unconsciously, he used it in his infiltrations and to protect himself from Jedi mind powers. As soon as Revan or anyone from the Empire found out, Adon would be on the other side, tortured until he becomes a Sith. But the Jedi, despite everything, showed mercy to Adon and promised to help him if he freed her. They connected, both on a human level and through the Force. She showed Adon all the pain he had caused, making him feel every death he was responsible for. Adon ended up confused, broken, and scared. He killed her to save her from what Revan would do to her, and fled to save himself from the same fate. He ended up on Nar Shadda, where he changed his identity, adopted the name Adon, and the mask of the carefree, flirtatious role began to slip out of control until he no longer knew who he really was. Until one day, he met you. Although Kreia forced Adon to stay with us, he partially wanted to do so already because he saw redemption in us. A kind and wise Jedi willing to fight to protect others, exactly as Jedi should be, but weakened and in need of help. Adon thought, after everything I've done, all the suffering I've caused, perhaps my redemption, my salvation, lies in this Jedi, if I can protect him until he saves far more people than I've killed. Adon is my favorite character in the game precisely because of the beautiful light hidden within his horrible dark story. The mask behind which he hid concealed his past, but also his desire for redemption. By tearing off the mask, we reveal his true potential, for upon discovering that he is Force sensitive, he asks us for something very important.
Once, a Jedi showed me the Force. I heard it. I felt it. At the time, there was too much pain to confront it. Because if I did, it meant I would be changed into something else. Now, I'm not afraid of it anymore. And I think that by learning how to use it, I can help protect you. Or at least buy you some time when disaster comes screaming in. I want to learn how to use the Force.
If he learns to use the Force, he'll be able to help us much more than he can now. We can accept this proposal, in which case we do for Adan what Kreia did for us, and just as she is our master, we become Adan's master with these words. Just close your eyes and open your mind. You must learn to feel it around you. Feel its currents, its eddies. Listen to the echo of your thoughts, your heart, separated from war, separated from hate. Think of what you felt when you felt the need to help me, to protect me. And at last, Adan, awaken. And this is one of the best twists in the game, a twist that's both narrative and gameplay driven. There aren't many games that dare to turn the protagonist into a teacher and mentor. Just as Kreia helps us, now we can help others. Adan's class changes from Scoundrel to Jedi Sentinel, which is why I haven't leveled him up all this time, so he'll have more Jedi levels. This group, this party, is iconic to me, not just because of their personalities, but because of how these very different people with such grey pasts unite under us, their master, and how this band of outcasts and traumatized individuals becomes an alliance of protectors of the light. Although, of course, if we're playing dark side, we can pervert all of this. We can manipulate Adan into forgetting the woman who saved him, convince him to give in to his rage and the desires of his basest instincts, and turn him into a Sith. There's also something special about a game that lets you turn nobodies into terrifying monsters of evil, but the light side version is more satisfying. And it's as if the moment you take on your first student is deliberately timed, because after completing several side quests and becoming known on Nar Shadda, someone named Viskis contacts you. He cordially invites us to meet him at the Jesusnewc Tar bar to settle the whole bounty issue with the exchange. Obviously, it's a trap, but it's our only chance to get rid of that damn bounty, so we go. As we head to meet him, Mira intercepts us and takes us to her sleeping quarters to talk. She warns us that Viskis wants to capture us personally to take us to Godo and claim the entire bounty for himself, which has angered all the bounty hunters on Nar Shadda, who will come after us and our companions. This conversation turns out to be a ruse to distract us until a gas knocks us out. Mira steals the spacesuit we use on Peragus to impersonate us and avoid being poisoned by the toxic air of the Jesusnewc Tar. Meanwhile, things are starting to get really dangerous. The bounty hunters switch from stalking to hunting. The Twi'lek sisters ambush Adan in the cantina, but he sees them coming from afar and is more than ready for a fight. It's clear that this scene is the sign for when Adan is already a Jedi and gets his moment to shine. Even mechanically, it seems the sign for it. The sisters attack in melee and use shields, so if Adan is still a scoundrel, he'll have a really hard time. But if he's already a Jedi, and moreover, if he already has his own lightsaber, it'll be an absolute breeze, rewarding those who've played well. Unfortunately, this kicks off what I call the chain of stupidity. I really like this world and there are still cool things left, but there are several things here that I don't understand. To begin with, what was Mira's plan? She shows up before Viskis and is immediately captured. I have no idea what the plan was. That fucking Keskalil, who was hanging around, I guess, reveals that he knew we'd arrive on Nar Shadda, but stayed hidden because he didn't want to talk to you. Now he feels bad that things are getting out of hand, so both him and you rush to rescue Mira. Though we won't see him during the rescue, so I think he just said he'd help to look good and went home. Continuing the chain of stupidities, we head into the Jesusnewc Tar without any protection. Luckily, Kreia teaches us the Force power breath control telepathically, making us immune to the poison. Otherwise, the exile would have died. And beside the poison, the Jesusnewc Tar is absolutely swarming with enemies. Weak, yes, but there are a ton of them, so either you've already unlocked Force Lightning at level 3 and you massacre them all with ease, which is more satisfying than it should be, or you have to kill them one by one while wondering if this game really is as good as I'm telling you. During the rescue, Viscis forces Mira and Hanghar to fight for his entertainment, just in case it wasn't clear that he's evil. And here's the interesting part. Depending on your current force alignment, you'll control one of the two who will later join your party. If you're neutral or on the light side, it'll be Mira. If you're on the dark side, it'll be Hanghar. While it's less weird than having one character join you if you're male and another if you're female, it really gets on my nerves. Most players choose the light side because it's more satisfying, but Mira is one of the worst characters in the game. She's not that bad. If she were in KOTOR 1, I'd say she's cool, but in the middle of this amazing game with incredible characters, comparison is the thief of joy. Mira comes off poorly. On the other hand, Hanghar is very interesting, a horrible being with strange perceptions of life and death. I'll talk about both of them in more detail later. For now, it's time to fight. Since we're on the light side, we're controlling Mira. It's also a damn shame because Mira isn't a character designed for combat, but for stealth and abilities. The only special thing about her in combat is being able to use rockets from a small launcher on her wrist, like the Fets. These rockets are like grenades, but slightly better, nothing special. You'll have to play with intelligence and patience to defeat Hanghar and all the enemies that come after. If we were on the dark side and controlling Hanghar, we wouldn't have to go through this ordeal. He's a barbarian. You activate rage and massacre everyone in your path. Much simpler and more satisfying. But hey, we're nice people, so Mira's the one who lives and she opens the door for us. We end the chain of stupidity by standing before Viscis. His real plan was to use us to arrange a meeting with Godo in person and assassinate him, thus becoming the crime lord. But since all the people here get their paychecks from Godo, they simply kill Viscis. Okay? And it turns out that right here there's a trap that Godo uses to knock us unconscious and capture us. Okay? Aaron and Mira meet, but with the exile imprisoned aboard Godo's cloaked cruiser, it's impossible to use the Ebon Hawk to rescue us or even to escape the planet. They come up with a plan. Godo steals Boga's transports, so if we got hold of one of their ID numbers, the cruiser will pick us up, giving us access to it. But those IDs are in a Boga warehouse guarded by droids. Only a droid could infiltrate it and retrieve them. Wait a minute. For the third time in this game, T3M4 comes to the rescue in a simple sequence where we psychopathically kill one of the droid guards and solve a puzzle to obtain the coordinates. After that, 3 HK-50s appear to stop us. Just a reminder that not long ago, a 3v3 with the Exile, Kreia and Aaron was a tough fight and 2 of them were Jedi. Now, fucking Master T3 wipes them all out by himself. Look, if he's really poorly equipped, the fight might be too tough and you'll have to run, but with just a little time and effort, T3 will be strong enough to wipe out these killer droids. T3 meets up with Aaron and Mira and you choose 2 party members to go rescue the Exile. They don't tell you, but it's a long and pretty tough dungeon, so it's recommended to bring someone really good in combat like the Handmaiden or Visas and someone skilled like Beodor or T3. Meanwhile, the Exile wakes up in front of a hologram of Godo, which is hilarious, because Viscis did all of this to meet him in person and kill him, so his plan was doomed from the start. And here comes another plot twist, one of my favorites in the game. The reason Godo wanted a living Jedi is because he wants to recruit us to save the galaxy. Godo, despite being a criminal, considers himself a patriot and is aware of the terrible threats looming and the Republic's futility. He realized that its only chance of survival is to stop squandering resources from healthy, powerful planets on futile attempts to save struggling worlds that have little to offer in return. So, if we're on the light side, we'll go to the planets in trouble and solve their problems, allowing the Republic to grow stronger. If we're on the dark side, we'll finish off those planets, send them to hell, and the Republic won't have to waste resources on them anymore. One way or another, what we do will save the Republic, at least in the short term. The exchange's reward was meant to motivate half the galaxy to find a Force user and bring them to Godo for recruitment. One of your lines is getting angry at Godo, emphasizing that if he had simply asked you for help, you would have agreed. If the HK-50 on Peragus had simply called Godo and communicated his desire instead of killing everyone, none of this plot would have happened, literally nothing. Not to mention, it's even more hilarious to remember people like Lucia, how they're willing to kill us, believing Goto will pay them to bring us to him alive or dead. It would have backfired. Midway through the conversation, our allies arrive, and we take control of them. The Goto cruise ship is probably the best level in the game. In my opinion, there are two things in which KOTOR 1 surpasses its sequel: side quests and variety. KOTOR 2 relies too much on just pushing forward and killing enemies in a basic interior. Many of the game's environments blend into one another. I feel like I've already said this before. Whatever. The cruiser seems like it's going to be another of those, but then you discover there are plenty of obstacles in your way. Droids, turrets, mines, force fields. You have to find programming codes on droids, both broken ones lying around and enemy droids you defeat, and use those codes to trigger various effects in the dungeon. It's very satisfying to unlock paths, disable turrets, turn mines against your enemies until you claim your reward and reach the exile, going from a 2-member party to 3, and turning droids that could have been a threat into easily defeated minions. You use one of the programming codes to sabotage the ship so it explodes when you leave. Just then, all the bounty hunters who had been chasing you show up, board the cruiser, and you have to take them out as you race back to the Ebon Hawk, watching them all go up in flames as you escape. What a satisfying finale. Several things that happened in the Jesusnewc didn't sit well with me, but it's been more than made up for. Although, well, technically it's not the end. We talk to Mira again, and she decides to stay with us. I'm not really sure why. I've even gone back to review this scene's dialogue. Mira reveals that she was hired by Kes Khalil to watch over us and protect us if necessary. Okay, that to some extent explains why she knocked us out and went to see Viscus in our place, but it doesn't explain why she joins the group now, because she feels like it, I guess. Then the droid that showed us Goto's hologram also appears, having snuck onto our ship. Goto speaks to us through it, saying he'll leave this droid with us to observe us and communicate with us while we save his beloved Republic. So bam bam bam, just like that we've got 2 new party members. It's a shame that both of them are among the most mechanically disappointing characters in the game. Mira has the rocket launcher thing, yeah okay, but for combat, Kreia, the Handmaiden, Visas, and Jedi Aden are far better. For skills, Beodor and T3 are way better, and Goto is another droid, but worse than T3 in every way. He has an unique ability. He can hack enemy droids, but shit! We just cleared the level with the most droids in the game, so there won't be many opportunities to use it. We'll have to leave this large group on the ship while we head down to Nar Shadda once more to finally speak with the first of the lost Jedi Masters, Kes Khalil. Another reason why Nar Shadda was my choice for the first world to visit is that Kes Khalil is a breath of fresh air compared to the arrogant and furious Atris. Kes couldn't be more different from her. He saw what was happening around him and asked himself a painful question. If half of the Jedi left the Order and fell to the dark side, obviously something has gone wrong. Someone has made a mistake. But what or who? There are only 2 possibilities. Either the Jedi teachings are wrong, or the current Jedi Masters are incompetent and incapable of teaching them correctly. Both options make the Jedi look like crap, and poor Kes can't see any way out. He tells us that on the very day we were exiled, he left the Order. We were an opportunity for the Jedi Masters to see their mistakes, confront them, and fix them, and they decided to just screw us over, plain and simple. Kes decided this is the last straw and left. Later, the genocide on Kotor occurred, revealing that there was still one more enemy to confront, one with a power never seen before. Kes met with the Council, and they decided that each Jedi would travel to a different planet to gather information. But Kes, in secret, had already given up. Seeing his companions and himself fall into the same mistakes over and over again, Kes came to Nar Shadda to die. He had given up so much that, despite seeing refugees and the poor being abused, he did nothing. And suddenly, we came along, and in a single day saved hundreds of lives and dealt a heavy blow to the criminal underworld, inspiring this sad Jedi to return once more. Kes swears he'll help us once we've gathered the rest of the Council, but he refuses to tell us why we lost the Force and why we were exiled. He may have lost faith in his friends, but he promised not to tell us unless they were all together, and he's keeping that promise. The conversation with Kes Khalil is excellent because it finally shows us a Jedi aware of the Order's flaws, albeit depressed because he's unable to find solutions. He reminds me a lot of Luke Skywalker in Episode 8, except that Luke actually has some of the solutions and still admires the Force, even though he's cut himself off from it, which says a lot about him in a positive way, but I can't explain why yet. When we return to the ship, we not only have a bunch of new interactions with our companions, but they also talk among themselves. Most of their interactions are funny, but every now and then there's a serious one. After extracting Adan's secret, he confronts Kreia, telling her she no longer has anything to blackmail him with. And the old hack laughs in his face, saying that if he doesn't obey her, she'll use the Force to alter his memory and turn him back into the monster he was. Many defend Kreia, but even though there are truths and plenty to learn from her philosophy, this bitch is evil, and this scene makes it clearer than ever. Anyway, we finally finished the first planet. It's time to head to the second planet. While we're on our way, we should get to know our new party members. Godo is a tremendously simple character. He wants to save the Republic and we are his tool. That's it. But there's a twist. An excellent twist if we gain some influence with him and complete several side quests involving the strange droids on Nar Shadda. We can confront Godo about how much he seems to rely on droids. Those strange droids seem to be at his command, like the droid that killed the Bith, or the droids guarding his cruiser, or even the droid right here before us, tasked with watching us and communicating with him. Some of you may have already noticed the twist. Godo isn't talking to us through this droid. Goto is this droid. He tells us his story. He used to be just a simple administrative droid on Telos, and some son of a bitch gave him an order and a rule to follow. G0T0. Save the Republic and do it without breaking any laws. The topic of droids in Star Wars is very interesting and is strangely underexplored. They're often portrayed as mere robots without free will, simply following their programming. Okay, but it turns out that the longer they're in operation, the more they learn. Like a baby growing into a child, a teenager, and an adult, a droid will gradually develop a personality. After a few years, it's a person with its memories, tastes, fears, hell, a personality! We see it in R2-D2, C-3PO, and BB-8. Disturbingly, what's considered normal in Star Wars is that this personality is seen as a bug in their behavior and they wipe the droid's memories. It's recommended to do this every few years. Just look at T3 in KOTOR 1. He didn't speak, he just obeyed orders, but here, years later, he's his own character. He likes playing Pasak, he teases others in a couple of dialogues, he has secrets and he makes his own decisions. But anyway, getting back to Godo, that order triggered something called a logic bomb in him. He made millions of calculations on how to save the Republic without breaking any laws. That's impossible. His droid brain exploded, broke apart, and when a droid suffers a logic bomb, there are usually unforeseen consequences. In Godo's case, he still wants to save the Republic, but now he's going to do it by breaking every law in the book. He drew on movie cliches to create a false persona, manipulated stocks and the economy, and dove headfirst into the criminal underworld, becoming one of the galaxy's most powerful crime lords, all with the intention of using that power to save the Republic. That being said, Godo himself isn't a particularly memorable character, but discovering he's a droid and learning his backstory is one of the game's best moments, original and super interesting. On the other hand, we have our new party member, Mira. I'll take this opportunity to also talk about Henhar, who would have joined us if we were on the dark side. It turns out we're more connected to Mira than it might seem. Her and her family were enslaved by the Mandalorians on Malachor V. Yes, the planet of the final battle of the Mandalorian Wars, the planet we ourselves blew apart, ending countless lives, including those of her family. But since the Mandalorians had taught Mira how to defend herself, when she ended up on Nar Shadda, she was able to get by. She discovered a natural talent for finding people, so she became a bounty hunter, but only accepted jobs where she didn't have to kill anyone. In fact, the reason why he hates her so much is that Henhar tried to kill her, she managed to save herself and seriously wound him, but spared his life. In Wookiee culture, when someone saves your life, you incur something called a life debt, in which you swear to dedicate your life to the person who saved you. Henhar has a very particular way of viewing this debt, as we'll see later, and this only made him hate Mira. After empathizing with her a bit, we agree that there's something special about Nar Shadda. She says she likes the hustle and chaos, finds it easy to go with the flow, and we tell her that, perhaps, if she opened herself to the Force, she could understand it. Yes, Mira is also Force sensitive, and we can turn her into our student. Unfortunately, not all conversions are as good as Adan's. Some, like yours and the handmaidens that we'll see later, you have to work for, but others, like Mira's, you can do in just one conversation, which feels really bad and isn't satisfying at all. It's a shame the scene itself isn't bad. We can show Mira that she's so comfortable on Nar Shadda and so good at finding people because she was unconsciously using the Force. After opening her soul, the sheer intensity of the real chaos of connections almost kills her, but she begs us to make her stronger because she wants to stop running, to stop feeling like she's constantly about to be hunted. This would be fine if we'd had time to get to know her and her true personal desires had been made clearer, because what she says at the end comes a bit out of nowhere. On the other hand, we have Henhar. This companion is like a reward for the player. To get him, you have to be on the dark side, so they give you the most screwed up character. As we saw in KOTOR 1, at this point in the Star Wars timeline, Kashyyyk is a newly discovered planet. It didn't take Czerka long to see the potential in the Wookiees, and it set out to enslave them all. At that time, Henhar was already an oddity among the Wookiees. He preferred living and hunting in the Shadowlands to the safety of the villages, so he considered his companions weak. Henhar's belief was confirmed when Czerka arrived and began capturing them. For better or worse, his time in the Shadowlands has led Henhar to believe that the best solution to everything is kill. This sounds a bit hyperbolic, but that's just how Henhar is. He decided that his fellow Wookiees would suffer as slaves and were too weak to free themselves, so he killed them all. Then he decided that humans are sons of bitches for being slavers, and he decided to kill them all. But this doesn't mean Henhar is stupid, no, not even close. If you tell him, hey, not all humans are slavers, he basically responds, no, but you all have the potential to be. Or weren't most Sith once Jedi? His argument is that if the Jedi, who are supposed to be the best and wisest, can become Sith, who are supposed to be the worst and most evil bastards, then maybe we just all suck, and honestly, I can't say he's entirely wrong. However, Henhar is a walking contradiction. To begin with, if he hates humans, why has he joined the group? Well, because he sees the spirit of the hunter in you and he wants to learn from you. The biggest contradiction is that Henhar hates slavery, but he himself is a slave, not to Czerka, but to his own culture. Henhar hated being indebted to Mira for life, but he was, and it wasn't a contractual debt or anything, it was a metaphorical debt. Nothing compelled Henhar to honor it. Mira herself didn't want anything to do with him, yet there he was, in pain over something that only existed in his mind. Ever since Czerka arrived, Henhar sees slavery everywhere. His fellow Wookiees were slaves to their weakness, just like everyone who falls into the hands of bounty hunters, and he himself is a slave to his loyalty to his comrades. Despite having killed them all, he loved them and wants to return to them in the afterlife to ask for forgiveness, and he can only do so if he adheres to his culture, including life debts. You can connect with Henhar, forge a bond with him, and while you can't turn him into a Jedi or Sith because he isn't Force sensitive, you can do something almost as interesting. Through your conversations, you can make him see that, despite all his talk about prey, he is his own prey. His love for his fellow Wookiees and his desire to see them again in death are in conflict with his violent nature, making him weak. As a good Sith, you can hammer away at his internal conflict until it breaks him, until Henhar decides to give in to his basest instincts, knowing that after his death, he will sink into the darkness of the Shadowlands and never see his tribe again. And so, by freeing him, you turn him into your slave, forcing him to abandon what little good remained in him and transforming him into your personal killing machine. Damn, first it was Adam being a torturer and murderer, then the droid that broke down because they asked it an impossible task, then Mira, who's basically a kid whose life was screwed up by the war, and now this psychopathic Wookiee. Let's go talk about happier things on a happier planet. Well, relatively. Let's go to the next world, Dantooine. The first thing we hear when we land on Dantooine is that the entire population hates the Jedi with intensity. In fact, if we carry a lightsaber, they tell us to go screw ourselves before we even set foot on the ground. This may come as a great surprise to those who played KOTOR 1, since Dantooine was home to the second largest Jedi Academy in the galaxy, second only to Coruscant, of course. You spent a significant amount of time on this planet, carrying out side missions in which you either helped or hurt the locals, who were happy to have these guardians of peace so close by. But the resolution of the Jedi Civil War changed everything. The Academy was destroyed by Malach's bombers, which caused great harm to the people. Shortly thereafter, the remaining Jedi went to Kotor, and, well, after that, the few who were left were pretty much screwed. The people of Dantooine concluded that it was all the Jedi's fault. They were aloof, arrogant, and solitary neighbors. It was Dark Jedi who carried out the bombing, and when those who remained could have protected them and helped them recover, they bailed. Honestly, I understand why people are so pissed off. There's a damaged droid near the landing zone. If we fix it, it tells us it was a droid in the service of the Academy, identifies us, and lets us access its information about us, though it turns out to have only a recording. In the video, we see Masters Rook and Vandar discussing us when we were just a Padawan. Both Masters appeared in KOTOR 1. Vandar was just a Yoda clone, the important one is Rook. In that first game, Rook was systematically against us, a kind of Mace Windu clone. Let's turn to the movies for a moment. The three best examples for understanding the Jedi and their failure are Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Mace Windu. Luke Skywalker is a perfect man who, despite a tendency toward risk-taking and violence, has impeccable morals. Obi-Wan is an almost perfect man, for he has only one flaw, but it's a critical one. Obi-Wan follows the Jedi dogma without questioning it, which leads him to make grave mistakes. Mistakes that would culminate in the birth of Darth Vader. Finally, Mace Windu is a good person, a guardian of peace, but he's a terribly flawed man. He is arrogant, haughty, disrespectful, extremist when it suits him, and passive when it doesn't. He's the first example that comes to mind when someone talks about how the Jedi were an institution doomed to failure. Rook, the Jedi we're looking for, is 100 times worse than Windu. At least he had the decency to not insult Anakin to his face. We go to Administrator Terina Adare, who soon realized we were Jedi and asks us for help. She tells us right away that Rook is on Dantooine, trying to protect what's left of the planet that once housed the Jedi Academy. Both of them are trying to restore Dantooine to its former glory, but they're facing a lot of problems, such as the planet being overrun by scavengers looking to get rich by unearthing relics and holocrons in the Academy ruins, and mercenaries who harass the citizens. Adare tells us that Rook went to the ruins and hasn't returned, so she asks us to look for him. It's nostalgic to return to the plains of Dantooine and go on a bug-killing spree. In fact, it's the most nostalgic thing about this game. Even the Ebon Hawk feels different due to its different camera angle and a different party, but here it's like briefly going back to KOTOR 1. When we arrive at the temple, we see with our own eyes the result of the Jedi teachings. A ruined building, a symbol of the fall of an entire belief system, now inhabited by monsters and scavengers. It's the world's first and largest dungeon, and it's pretty decent. There are enemies, but not many, with various opportunities to get rid of them beside direct combat, and a couple of side quests such as finding a young woman who speaks like a child. It's obvious she was just a kid when Malak bombed the Academy. She survived, she hid, and has been barely hanging on for years, believing that one day the Jedi will return. But we are the only ones who've come, and all we can do is convince her to leave and start her life over from scratch. When we arrive at where Rook was supposed to be, we only find several dead mercenaries and a man studying ancient Jedi documents. Among the mercenaries, we find a message saying they managed to capture Rook and are holding him in the Crystal Cave until they could leave. But this scholar is much more interesting, because if we were playing as a woman, he is the character who joins the party instead of the handmaiden. Since we're playing as a man, we'll just talk a bit and he'll leave, so let's take this opportunity to talk about him. The Disciple is one of the least liked party members of the game among the average player, but if you bother to delve into his backstory and see what happens to him after he joins you, you'll realize he's much better than some say. This man is an agent of the Republic, tasked with finding out why the Jedi disappeared and where they went, a mission that convinces him to join you if you play as a woman. He has no problem admitting that, for now, he's failing completely. He has no idea what happened. The Disciple is very knowledgeable about Jedi matters despite not being one of them. This gives him a much more accurate view of the Jedi than the Jedi and Sith themselves. He talks about many things I've already mentioned, how the Jedi are supposed to be wise guardians of peace yet seem incapable of understanding and empathizing with ordinary people, blah 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 blah. But the Disciple specifies that the Jedi of this era in particular seem unable to admit their mistakes. An absurdly high number of them, such as Exar Kun, Revan and Malak, fell to the dark side, yet instead of engaging in self-criticism of their teachings and how they teach them, they insist they are not to blame for anything. We recently saw Kes Khalil engage in that self-criticism, but he's the exception, not the rule. Vrook will be the perfect example of a jerk Jedi you grow to despise despite all the good he does. Once you gain some influence with him, he'll reveal that he's interested in the Jedi and in you for more than just natural curiosity. He almost became a Jedi himself. They took him as a child, but he never became a Padawan because so many Jedi left during the Mandalorian Wars that there simply weren't enough masters for everyone, and some children were cast aside. And the Jedi who was supposed to be his master was you. The disciple remembers you, vaguely yet fondly. Even back then you had the makings of a leader, were admired by others, and it was clear you weren't your typical run-of-the-mill Jedi. After this, you can convince him to resume his training and become a Jedi. It's a shame that the disciple is like Mira. You can turn him into a Jedi in a single conversation. In fact, he's the worst example, it's even easier than Mira. But what's really important about the disciple is what happens after he joins the group. He spends all his time aboard the Ebon Hawk, like a true scholar, asking himself questions. Why have the Jedi hidden themselves precisely on Telos, Nar Shadda, Dantooine, Onderon, and Korriban? Why don't the hidden Sith attack? What are they waiting for? Why was Revan the opposite of the typical Sith, conquering planets without damaging them and seeking to unite armies to his own instead of destroying them? After several hours, the disciple figures it out. He uncovers everything simply by gathering information, thinking, and meditating. He finds answers to all these questions and discovers the villain's true plan, and Kreia's true plan. Kreia displays powers far beyond anything we've seen so far. It's revealed that, through the Force, she has made herself unknown to the disciple. He couldn't even see her, but she reveals herself to him to show her admiration. Kreia greatly respects that the disciple, if we call him by his real name, Mikal, managed to deduce this mystery, and then she erases his memory, blocking his ability to rediscover it all, because Kreia needs us to figure everything out at a specific moment. Kreia is forced to wipe the disciple's mind because this historian and scholar almost ruined her plans. That's all I have to say about the disciple. I really like that moment with Kreia, but other than that, he's pretty bland. To be fair, that was the intention. The disciple is kind, intelligent, simple, and mentally stable, serving as a contrast to this dark, traumatized, and generally fucked up group. But, as I always say, comparisons are the thief of joy. The disciple works very well as a mirror, but he's not interesting on his own. Well, say goodbye to the disciple. Since we're playing as a man, we won't see him again. Let's go to the cave mentioned in the message to rescue Rook. Turns out it's the Crystal Cave from KOTOR 1. It was an optional secret location there. The fact that it's mandatory here doesn't make it any less interesting. Each lightsaber can be enhanced with 2 crystals, and here you'll find a small handful, in particular a crystal attuned to your very essence, which only you can equip. This crystal adapts to your alignment with the Force, granting different bonuses depending on whether you're on the light side or the dark side, and the deeper you delve into the light or the darkness, the stronger the bonus will be. Now that I mentioned this, I'm going to talk about one of the game's few flaws. A large part of the story is about how both the Jedi and the Sith are idiots. Not because of their ideologies per se, but because they become so extremist that they've perverted those ideologies and turn into arrogant fools who bring trouble everywhere. We can even see it in our dialogue. In many conversations, you'll find that some of the things you can say are stupid, whether it's sucking up to the Jedi Council and refusing to see the Jedi's flaws, or being as murderous and psychopathic as a typical Sith. All of these options are usually the worst things you could do. None of your companions find it funny, and you'll often lose influence with them by behaving like that. It's part of what Kreia tried to teach us on Nar Shadda. Extremes are destructive. Obviously, extreme evil is, but so is extreme goodness, which, despite its good intentions, creates more problems than it solves. However, mechanically, the game rewards you for being an extremist. There are several important things. Visas joining your party, acquiring a prestige class, and getting access to a very important optional dungeon all depend on the intensity of your alignment. If you're not strongly aligned with either the light or dark side, visas will take a long time to join you, and you won't be able to access that dungeon or the prestige class. If you reach the maximum light or darkness alignment, you'll receive a bonus to your stats depending on your class, and as I said moments ago, the bonus from your aligned crystal will be more potent. The game is screaming at you that both the Jedi and the Sith are crap, that extremism is crap, and yet you're rewarded for acting like a typical extremist Jedi or Sith. If you want your character to stay neutral or switch between different ways of acting, fuck you, I guess. There are times, quite a few, when there's a wide variety of options. You only have to go back to the conversation with Atris, and at one point you could choose from 10 different dialogue options. And yes, there were extremist Jedi and Sith choices, but those were just 2 ways to roleplay out of 8. Precisely because you've had this great conversation, it's all the more jarring and annoying when the game forces you to make a simple binary choice. Either you're the return of our savior Jesus Christ or you're the devil. This is one of the biggest flaws of this great game, perhaps the biggest. Back to the mission, we find the mercenaries holding Vrook prisoner, but as soon as we free him, he wastes no time insulting us. It turns out, the mercenaries pretty much have a small army. They plan to kill the administrator and conquer Kunda, this area of Dantooine. According to Vrook, being captured was part of a brilliant plan that we won't see because we've ruined it. After chewing us out a bit more, we agree to talk once we've saved Kunda. We return and are tasked with reinforcing the defenses before the mercenaries attack. I really like this mission, it has a very Fallout New Vegas vibe. There are multiple optional tasks that affect the upcoming battle, some of which are influenced by your skills. You need medicine to heal wounded soldiers, repair to fix defense droids, security to barricade an entrance, and so on. Also, just like New Vegas did with some of the NCR and Caesar's Legion missions, if we're on the dark side we can ally with the mercenaries and take on the role of a saboteur, weakening the defenses. It's a relatively simple mission, but it's a lot of fun. Once you've done everything you can, it's time to choose where each squad will go and deliver a motivational speech, reminding us that our protagonist is a Jedi, but was also a general in one of the most violent wars in Star Wars history. The fight will be affected by all the decisions you've made, and it features the largest number of NPCs fighting that you'll see in the entire game. It's pretty good and not too difficult, especially if you've already reached level 18 and can blast them all with Force Lightning. There's a wide variety of Force powers, but offensively, Force Lightning is by far the best. At its third tier, it affects all enemies in the area and deals significant damage. You can practically breeze through fights just by spamming this power, especially if you're running with 3 Jedi and all 3 have learned it. After the battle, the administrator thanks us for our participation and offers us a reward that we can accept, refuse, or insist be used to erect a statue in our honor, to the surprise of everyone gathered. Vrook finally deigns to speak with us, but saving Kunda hasn't made him like us any better. Talking to him is like talking to Atris, except at least she tried to offer logical arguments. Vrook just says, "I'm always right and you are a piece of shit." He's the pirate software of the Jedi. Talking to him is incredibly frustrating. If you want to understand how a Jedi falls to the dark side, spend 5 minutes in a room with Vrook and you'll get it. At least, while Kes-Khalil refuses to tell us why we lost the Force and why we're regaining it, Vrook gives us a clue. He's surprised that obviously we can use the Force, but he doesn't sense it in us. It seems that other Force-sensitive individuals can't sense the Force in us, as if we're still disconnected, even though we're clearly regaining and using it. But of course, until we find Kavar and Vash, the mystery will remain. So, eager to kill that damn Vrook, but with the satisfaction of having saved many innocent people, we leave Dantooine. We've completed 2 of the 4 main planets. We're getting closer to assembling the Council and facing the hidden Sith. But before we resume the adventure, we should talk to our party members, since at this point we can access more dialogue with them. The Handmaiden will train us physically from certain levels onward. Her most important training sessions are the first and the third. I already mentioned that the first one grants you a special ability, but also if you express any surprise or discomfort about training in your underwear, she'll put on some clothes. To your surprise, that clothing is a Jedi robe. I also mentioned that the Handmaiden is only a half-sister to her sisters. They share the same father, General Yusanis. During the war, Yusanis had an affair with the Jedi Master, Aaron K., Revan's first teacher. I already warned you that all our allies are connected to us, Revan, or Malachor V in some way. And, because of the movies, we know that Force sensitivity is genetic, so the Handmaiden very likely has the potential to become a Jedi. We must speak with Kreia to learn how to convince her. She tells us that since she swore loyalty to Atris, who wishes to be the last Jedi, she will never learn the Jedi way. But no one has said anything about learning how to use the Force. After learning about this legal loophole, we must complete her 3 trainings. In each one, the Handmaiden asks you some questions about your relationship with Atris, about the war, about the Force. Little by little, it becomes clear that, although loyal to Atris, the Handmaiden also has a certain loyalty to her mother despite having never met her. She wishes to understand and honor her. Don't forget that the Achani see combat as a conversation, a way to understand others. After the 3 training sessions, she believes that she understands you and you can convince her to follow her mother's path by learning to use the Force. I don't know if I'd say the Handmaiden is one of my favorite party members, but I do like her a lot. I like that there's a character with an interest in the Force who seeks to understand those close to it. Plus, some of her lines are interesting and others are funny, since she's very blunt and dry, yet her lack of worldly experience makes her adorably innocent sometimes. However, the best part about turning the handmaiden into your apprentice is that Kreia, just to cause trouble, I guess, says a single word that causes a powerful echo to reach far, far away.
I want you to teach me the ways of the Force. To become a Jedi Knight like my mother. I want to feel what my mother felt for my father. What ran through my mother's veins when she was one with the Force. I wish to hear what my mother heard as she fought the Mandalorians, until the moment she died on Malachor V. I will not let you down, Exile. I will honor you as I honor the face of my mother.
Betrayal. Betrayal.
Betrayal? Mistress? She has betrayed me. The last of your sisters has betrayed me. Betrayed us. She is your sister no more.
This moment always gives me goosebumps. A large part of this game's power lies in its voice acting. Although most of it ranges from mediocre to good, Kreia's voice actress, Sarah Kesselman, is a damn fine theater actress who gives it her absolute all in every word that comes out of her mouth. Chris Avellone said that Sarah had the ability to make even the dumbest lines in his script sound like a beautiful poem with her voice. And speaking of Kreia, when you approach her at level 15 or higher with a strong alignment to either the light or dark side, she tells you that you've reached the limit of your abilities and must increase the intensity of your training. In KOTOR 1, you started by choosing a non-Jedi class, and once you left Taris, you picked a Jedi class, meaning Revan was a hybrid of two classes, making him unique among the party. But, of course, the Jedi classes are usually much better than the non-Jedi ones, so ironically, he was probably one of the weakest characters of that first game. Here, in KOTOR 2, when you turn a companion into a Jedi, they end up just like Revan. Adam becomes a scoundrel Jedi Sentinel hybrid, the handmaiden becomes a warrior Jedi Knight hybrid, but then what about us? Are we stuck with our starting class forever? Well, no. By talking to Kreia, we choose what's called a prestige class, which only we can access, making our protagonist the most unique and powerful character in the group, as they should be. We must choose one of the 3 prestige classes, similar to the 3 base classes. The Weapon Master is the evolution of the Knight, focused on melee combat. The Watchman is the evolution of the Sentinel, centered on skills, agility, and stealth, and the Jedi Master is the evolution of the Consular, focused on force powers. It's cool to be able to mix any combination of normal and prestige classes. If you want, you can start as a Jedi Knight and evolve into a Jedi Master, becoming an incredibly powerful super character in both lightsaber duels and the Force. And I wouldn't say whether it's more or less important, but after acquiring your prestige class, Kreia allows you to undergo special training. When we fight Visas, she uses a force power on us that makes us see the world as she does. We can talk to Kreia about it and she'll teach us how to use this power at any time. It's simply called Force Vision. It's pretty much useless, but it lets us see the alignment of every NPC in the game. It's pretty cool to see how, for example, on Dantooine, the administrator Adare is strong in the light side and how some mercenaries are on the dark side while others are neutral. But Kreia warns us that seeing with the Force is neither a useful nor a special ability compared to shutting down all your senses and using only the Force to perceive your surroundings. Before the Prestige class, she refused to train us in that skill as it was too complex for us. Now, the time has come. Under Kreia's tutelage, in just a few seconds, we expand our being to encompass the entire ship and read the thoughts of every member of our party. A great moment.
My feet walk from the ashes of Kotor. I shall not fear, for in fear lies death, and...
From the first movement flows the second. Strike, repeat, circle one's opponent, repeat, faster, quicker. If Father had been faster. If only Father had been faster. If I was faster, I would no longer be the last of my sisters. But does Atris love him? Jedi do not love. Does Atris hate him? Jedi do not hate. This journey is harder than any she has sent me on.
This place is quiet. Nothing like Nar Shadda. I don't even know why I'm here. Wonder how much the bounty on the Jedi is now.
Switch the face of the +1 -1 card. The totals are 9-10. Switch the face of the +2 -2 card. The total is 8-11. Switch.
Your command echoes still, General, and I obey, as I did at Malachor.
When the lesson is over, we have several things to discuss. First, Kreia hasn't heard Beodor, but we have. The connection between Beodor and the exile is strong, and not even Kreia can penetrate it. Second, Adam was apparently thinking about playing Pasak instead of important things like everyone else. This is the mental defense he told us about on Nar Shadda. It's really cool to see it in action, to watch how every Jedi he met took him for a shallow idiot. Finally, our character notices something beyond this ship, an echo that calls to us. Kreia warns us that this echo is the next step in our training, but it's still beyond our current abilities, and she'll teach us how to hear it after we've gathered the Jedi Council. Before heading to the next planet, we can go talk to Adam and ask him why he was thinking about Pasak. He simply explains how occupying your mind with certain repetitions or distractions is a powerful shield when someone tries to get into your head, and he offers to teach you with the game of Pasak. What Adam says after finishing the game is one of my favorite moments despite its simplicity, because not only is he teaching you a real way to meditate and calm yourself that you can use in real life, but it also shows us once again how seriously Adam takes his self-proclaimed role as our guardian.
If you're ever fighting someone who has the power over your mind, whether light or dark, play Pasak. Start listing hyperspace routes, recite engine sequencers, and when they try to use their powers on you, suddenly it's not as easy as they thought.
Because you'll be right here with me, playing Pasak, where they can't reach you.
Onderon is quite different from the planets we've visited so far. They have problems, sure. They're in the midst of a political conflict between Queen Talia and her nephew Baklu, who threatens to seize power through a coup d'etat. But aside from that, it's a rich, civilized, and peaceful planet. That's why it's surprising that it's the planet where we get into trouble the fastest. We don't even get to land before Baklu's men, who don't want a Jedi getting involved in the conflict, open fire, forcing us to make an emergency landing on the nearby moon, Duxun. While we explore the jungle, Adam stays behind on the ship, repairing it and keeping an eye on the news. Like any good would-be dictator, Baklu has lied through his teeth, saying we were a Republic ship that opened fire on innocent vessels. The exile is strangely laconic in his dialogue, and when Adam notices it, Kreia reveals that Duxun was one of the first battlefields of the Mandalorian War. This is the second time the exile has visited this moon. And, fittingly, before long, we run into more than just jungle beasts. It turns out the Mandalorians, proud of their warfare, have settled on this moon, hidden from the main world's eyes. We may harbor great hatred for the Mandalorians, but all roads lead to Rome, and whether we choose peace or war, we will end up facing their leader, Mandalore. All Mandalorian leaders take the name Mandalore. It was Mandalore the Ultimate who made the decision to conquer the galaxy, and now Mandalore the Preserver has taken up the mantle. This current leader has seen how, after the war, the Mandalorians have become divided and turned into mercenaries and bounty hunters, or worse, mere bandits, and has decided to make it his priority to find and enlist every Mandalorian possible, restore the clans, and revive this dying race. Mandalore makes a deal with us. If we help the camp members, he'll lend us a small ship to visit Isis, the capital of Onderon. I don't know how many tasks you have to complete for Mandalore to hold up his end of the bargain. I always do them all because they're either fun or along the way. For example, they ask you to find the gear of a young Mandalorian who went to explore the jungle and has been missing for 3 days. They assume he's dead. When you find him, he's very much alive, but it turns out he ran out of ammunition and has been waiting on a hilltop for 3 days, surrounded by beasts patiently waiting for him to come down. Even if you save him, you'll have to decide whether to tell his commander about this shameful failure. There are 2 moments in particular that I like, because they make you see the good and bad of the Mandalorian philosophy. There is a battle circle where Mandalorians challenge each other to one-on-one duels. You can participate. If you do, one of the Mandalorians you defeat, a young novice, will consider that you've stripped him of his honor, and since there's no war right now, his only way to reclaim it is to throw himself at you in an impossible deathmatch, for he'd rather die than live without honor. There's something messed up about this philosophy that leads a young man to throw his life away because he equates losing a friendly duel with a failure from which he can never recover. On the other hand, there's a merchant who buys and sells equipment. If you mock him for being a merchant in a warrior race, he throws it back at you 100-fold for your ignorance, explaining that just because the Mandalorians are a warrior race doesn't mean everyone is a soldier. The farmers who feed the population and the mechanics who keep the machinery running are just as important and deserving of honor as the soldiers. It's an honest yet uncommon way to portray a warrior race in fiction, and I really like it. This particular guy is my favorite Mandalorian. If you approach him with Mandalore in your party, he complains to his leader that he doesn't trust us. Mandalore replies, "The Jedi is with me. Do you have a problem with that?" The merchant relents, "No, Mandalore." And Mandalore gets angry. "Then you're an idiot. If you have a problem with a Jedi, you have a problem with me, and you should say so instead of cowering." It was that short exchange that made me respect Mandalore. He's tough and demands a lot from his comrades, but he's genuinely trying to help them and teach them to be strong and think for themselves. Well, after doing a couple of tasks, we begin preparations to travel to Onderon, but Sith soldiers show up. Remember that we haven't seen them since Peragus, and suddenly, here they are. It's a good sequence. A Mandalorian engineer detects them infiltrating and sets a trap, killing several in a single explosion, showing what the merchant told us, that all Mandalorians are warriors even if they aren't soldiers. This kicks off a curious fight in which we must collaborate with the Mandalorians, even though our protagonist's backstory involves waging a bloody war against them. After winning, and before we leave, Kreia threatens Mandalore that if he betrays us, she will kill him, revealing that she knows he accompanied Revan. If Mandalore's voice wasn't enough of a hint, Kreia spoils that this man is none other than Canderous Ordo, the Mandalorian party member of KOTOR 1. Canderous, or Mandalore, has some interesting things to say about Revan, but he's not ready to talk about that yet. When we land outside Isis, we see that the situation on Onderon isn't as idyllic as it seemed. Yes, it's a rich and civilized world, but you can tell that Baklu is doing everything he can to screw things up until they explode so he can overthrow Queen Talia. Because of his lie that we were a Republic ship that had opened fire, the planet is now forced to require a special passport to enter and exit Isis, screwing over many people, especially those trapped in a now increasingly tense city. Especially those that want to leave and now see themselves trapped in a now increasingly tense city. Several of ISIS's side quests are about deciding who to give several passports to, allowing them to escape. A woman and her daughter reveal that they are related to a man who tried to assassinate Baklu and ask you for help to leave before Baklu can retaliate. There's a Republic agent who fought alongside you in the Mandalorian Wars, and he asked for your help to accurately inform the Republic about the current situation on Onderon. And of course, you've got some son of a bitch who wants to screw everyone over, but he'll pay you a fortune for passports. That's the dark side guy. Speaking of the dark side, this section also has one of my favorite side quests. A woman hires you to assassinate several people close to Queen Talia. You can just go in guns blazing, but the most fun way to do it is to channel your inner Agent 47 and make it look like accidents. Not only is it fun, but it's a dark side quest. There are very few of those. Another thing I love about Onderon is that it's the only planet, not just in this game but in all of KOTOR, where the dark side path can be argued to be better than the light side one. In KOTOR 1, the dark side decisions on Taris, Dantooine, Tatooine, Kashyyyk, Manaan, and Korriban were just about being a bastard, plain and simple. In this game, on Telos, you'd ally with Zerka, a bunch of greedy assholes. On Dantooine, with some evil mercenaries. On Nar Shadda, you just screw everyone over. But here, on Onderon, there is an argument that Baklu would be a better leader for Onderon than Queen Talia. There's a good, mandatory conversation where you get drawn into a debate between two people arguing over who would be the better leader, Talia or Baklu, and they ask for your opinion. What I like about this dialogue is that despite being on opposite sides, these two men are debating politely, with arguments. It's rare to see that, both in Star Wars and in the real world. In contrast, while these two are talking calmly, on the other side of the plaza, you'll have to appease a jackass and pick up. In contrast, while these two are talking calmly, on the other side of the plaza, you'll have to pacify a jackass hired by Baklu to enrage the masses, who will futilely try to attack the armed law enforcement. Here I have to admit a personal blind spot, and I'm sharing it to see if anyone in the comments can shed some light on it. A big part of why many people want Baklu is because Queen Talia is closely tied to the Republic. While this is the most humane decision, since Onderon can allocate some of its wealth to planets wounded by the war, many people are angry, arguing that this alliance is only harmful to Onderon, which finds itself spending vast resources trying to help with something as impossible as repairing the ravages of a violent war. Baklu advocates for independence, for breaking away from the Republic, but not only for that reason, he also argues that if Onderon remains in the Republic, they will lose their culture, and that's where I get lost. I can't understand how something as relatively simple as an alliance can lead to the weakening or even the disappearance of a culture. Small spoiler, at the end of the game, a character tells you what happens to everyone you've met and every place you've visited. If Talia governs, Onderon will remain in the Republic, but it will effectively lose much of its culture. If Baklu governs, he will rule for a very short time and there will be many deaths, but Onderon will effectively secede from the Republic and preserve its culture. I also don't understand what kind of person prioritizes something as abstract as their culture over the well-being of others, but that's a conversation for another day. The plan is to speak with a contact of Mandalore, Dagon Gant, who knows that Master Kabar is secretly working as an advisor to Queen Talia. That's probably why Baklu tried to kill us. Since we're a Jedi, he figured we'd ally ourselves with Kabar and Talia. Gant can arrange a meeting with Kabar, but he's just been arrested for murder. So most of your time on Onderon will be spent solving this murder. If you know where to go, it won't take you long, it's not that hard to solve either. Honestly, I would have preferred it to be more like the Dantooine murder or the Monon trials from KOTOR 1, where you had to pay attention to a lot of details. I've already mentioned that game had way better side quests. Even so, this one isn't bad either. Especially when you realize that the main reason Gunn was arrested is a misunderstanding. Witnesses say that Gunn and the murdered woman insulted each other harshly that very night, but a friend of both tells you that it was normal between them, a kind of verbal competition they enjoyed. Gathering the necessary evidence to prove that Gunn didn't kill anyone only leads you to argue with the person in charge of the investigation. It's obvious that Baklu has discovered Gunn is someone important and has forced the authorities to hold their investigation and ignore evidence, once again demonstrating his corruption, but also showing that he has his limits. The evidence you obtain is decisive, and Gunn is released despite the investigators' complaints. With Gunn by our side, we use his connections to arrange a meeting with Kabar. It would seem that this planet is the shortest and simplest of them all, but then Baklu's men, led by Colonel Tolbin, arrive, interrupting us and forcing Kabar to escape. We must flee in a short but well thought out sequence. First, some soldiers ask us what's going on and recommend that we leave the planet, making it clear that only a small chunk of the army is loyal to Baklu. Then, as we pass by some civilians, we hear them whispering among themselves, a hint not to turn our backs on them, since they'll try to kill us when we get close. Baklu has marked us, and the most extreme civilians want our heads. When we return to Duxon, they recommend we don't go back until things either calm down or completely blow up. In other words, Onderon will always be the last of the 4 planets we complete. This is really clever. Kabar is the best of the lost Jedi, so forcing us to save him for last makes us eager to finish our mission. In this playthrough, we still have Korriban left, but if we'd completed it, this interaction would be hilarious, since the Mandalorians tell us, "Go away and come back later," and as soon as we set foot on the Ebon Hog, we get a message, "The Civil War has started, get here ASAP!" To which the exile replies, "Wow, that was fast!" Mandalore decides to join us permanently, since the Sith are a great threat, and he prioritizes eliminating them over unifying the Mandalorian clans. If we talk to him on the ship, the guy plays it off really well, but he can't help asking us where we got the Ebon Hawk, clearly remembering that Revan disappeared piloting the ship. With him, we've now fully completed our party. Wait, I lied! Whoops! I could have repaired HK-47 a while ago, but I forgot. HK-47 was one of the most iconic characters in the first KOTOR. Revan's loyal assassin droid with a very distinctive way of speaking and a psychopathic personality perfectly suited to the dark humor that was so prevalent in that game's dark side conversations. In this game, he doesn't have as much presence as in the first one, but it's cool to have him around. You can tell the developers put him in because of how popular he was in the original game. And look, since we just powered up HK, it's a good time to talk about both of Revan's droids. These two go surprisingly unnoticed despite being connected to one of the biggest mysteries in this sequel. Where did Revan go and why? This question, tied to the iconic main character of the first installment, should be one of the game's central plot points, and it is, but since the exile has a dozen other things to worry about, it remains in the background. Revan decided to go alone, for the bonds that tied him to his loved ones could become a weakness wherever he went, but he took the droids with him. HK-47 can't tell us much about it. His memory has been completely wiped, but T3-M4 is another story. We can uncover much of this mystery by raising his influence after completing Telos. T3 will reveal that, before leaving, Bastila asked him to watch over Revan and, if anything happened to him, to return and find help. That's exactly what happened. Revan needs help. T3 took the Ebon Hawk and returned. erased the ship's coordinates so no one would know where it had been, wiped HK-47's memory, and even erased its own memory, so that Revan's location and intentions wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. The good thing is that it's implied T3 may have prepared everything to recall it at the perfect moment and lead us to Revan, because T3 chose us as Revan's savior, since we were his loyal general during the Mandalorian Wars. If we talk to HK-47 about the ship's deleted coordinates, he figures out that T3 erased them to cover his tracks. T3 then knocks him out with a stun blast and wipes his memory again! It sounds unbelievable, but the discreet T3 is a mix of Adan and Kreia. Like Adan, he's extremely loyal. Whether Revan is on the light or dark side, T3 is risking his life and the lives of many others in a desperate attempt to save his master, and all his decisions begin with Revan in mind. On the other hand, T3 is like Kreia. He is manipulating many, including us and himself, to make things happen in a specific way that will end in Revan's rescue. You can forget how manipulative T3 is because the game pays him no attention and barely gives him any scenes, whereas Kreia has tons of dialogue and scenes that show us the magnitude and complexity of her Machiavellian manipulations. Also, like Kreia, T3 doesn't care whether we're good or evil. Unlike Kreia, he prefers it if we're good and treat him well, but since he prioritizes rescuing Revan above all else, what he wants most is for us to become powerful. That's why he never abandons us, no matter how badly we treat him. Even on Nar Shadda, where we can sell him to a lying, abusive merchant, T3 still comes to our rescue when we're kidnapped by Godo. T3 is, in many ways, the unsung hero of this game. Never underestimate the droid. On the other hand, HK-47 doesn't tell us much about the plot, but he makes up for it by being the funniest character in the game. His iconic way of speaking, clarifying the type of statement before delivering it, combined with Christopher Tabori's excellent voice acting, makes even his simplest lines hilarious. You can talk about his copies, the HK-50s that chase us, infuriating HK-47, who doesn't even want to hear those crude imitations of himself mentioned. What pisses him off the most about them is that they carry out their programming in an extremely limited way. They are asked to kill someone, and they go right ahead without giving it a second thought. HK-47 takes pride in the motives behind his killings. He sees them as a form of expression, as a way to highlight the weaknesses of our cultures, and even to subdue entire planets with precise acts. That word defines what HK-47 desires: precision. More than killing itself, HK-47 enjoys inflicting the greatest damage with the least amount of effort and collateral damage. He will proudly tell you how he sparked a civil war by deliberately mistranslating a single word, leading two factions on a planet to destroy each other, allowing Revan to conquer it with ease. Because, of course, we mustn't forget that HK-47 was built by Revan, and, after seeing us, HK seems to understand why he was built. Revan wasn't at Malachor V, but he witnessed the massive destruction we caused. Have I explained what Malachor V is and why we talk about it so much? It's something I haven't been able to do well in this retrospective because even after replaying the game recently to get it as right as possible, it feels like there's no specific moment when Malachor V is explained to you. It's just mentioned often so that you eventually pick it up by repetition. Malachor V was the planet where the Mandalorian Wars ended. We, the Exile, were a general during the battle for that planet. We made the decision to use a machine called the Shadow Mass Generator, created by none other than Beodor. This machine, considered a weapon of mass destruction, manipulated the planet's gravitational field, causing it to collapse on itself, a destruction of incomprehensible magnitude that killed every Jedi and Mandalorian on the planet. Now, Malachor V is a massive, shattered rock, plunged into chaos under an eternal storm. An extreme decision that ended the war, since the number of Mandalorians killed was so high that they realized they couldn't continue with such depleted ranks. After observing us and speaking with us, HK-47 understands that he was created by Revan to ensure that a catastrophe like Malachor V never happens again, to defeat armies and conquer planets with words and precise assassinations of individuals, never with weapons of mass destruction. The conversations with HK culminate in something that only Kreia and him are intelligent enough to foresee. The number of Mandalorians killed on Malachor V was so great that they will never recover. No matter how much Mandalore says he will restore this warrior race, Kreia and HK know that the blow the Exile dealt them was so devastating that it condemned them to a slow, self-destructive extinction, since Malachor V The Mandalorians' fate has been to become bandits, mercenaries, and solitary bounty hunters, easily killed by Jedi. We go from one dead race to another, since our last destination is Korriban, the planet where the Sith used to hide, now extinct. Apparently, Master Vash is here, so there we go. Kreia stays on the ship, but she'll tell us the lore telepathically. This planet is empty. If you followed the light side in KOTOR 1, you probably participated in the extinction of Malach's Sith. If you went with the dark side, you'll hear that there was a mini civil war among Revan's followers. You can find more details in a dark hologram from Bastila. One way or another, Korriban is now an empty planet. Just as Dantooine is proof of the Jedi's failure, Korriban is proof of the Sith's failure. What's more, you can examine the tomb entrances, some of which were levels in KOTOR 1, and Kreia will give you a brief summary of the Sith Lords buried within. In particular, she talks about something in the lore that's easy to forget. The first Sith were a race, a specific species, but the word Sith eventually became more associated with their ideology than with the race itself, ultimately leading to the concept of the Sith we have now. There are also corpses. Kreia warns us not to loot them, as that will enrage the Sith spirits. Indeed, if we try to loot them, Hessis, powerful monsters, appear. I always found this a bit odd because the corpses have items and the Hessis give a lot of experience, so it's actually quite beneficial to loot them. The only real downside is that you lose influence with Kreia, which doesn't really matter. Before entering the main temple, we notice a disturbance in the dark side of the Force in a nearby cave, but Kreia tells us it would be wiser to explore the temple first. This time, she's right, so let's go to the temple. As soon as you enter, a cutscene shows that Darth Sion is here, so you play the dungeon with the tension of wondering who you'll encounter first, Vash or Zion. This level is simple but fun. Alongside a few little monsters, Sith assassins will constantly ambush you, just like on Peragus, although of course we're much stronger now than we were back then. To access more rooms, you'll have to pass 2 exams, one of which is theoretical. They ask you questions about Star Wars lore. The answers are scattered around Korriban. One question asks you which of the following 5 Sith Lords isn't buried on Korriban, but my favorite one is the one that asks for the Sith Code, which you can find in the library. Now, many Star Wars nerds know the iconic Jedi and Sith codes, but did you know they originated in KOTOR 1? Yeah, just like George Lucas didn't invent Darth Maul's double-bladed lightsaber. It debuted in a comic. George saw it and said, "That's really cool, I'm going to put it in the movies." The Jedi Code is: there is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the Force. It's alright, but the Sith Code is way better. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, my chains are broken. The Force shall set me free. Star Wars often focuses on the failures of the Jedi, particularly in the prequels, but the Sith are also a group doomed to constant failure. There's nothing wrong with their code. In fact, many dark side users originated as people who suffered injustice and persecution, and by discovering the dark power within themselves, they managed to free themselves. But the Sith pervert what freedom means, making their apprentices believe that the only true freedom is possible if you attain supreme power and seize the freedom of everyone who isn't you, so the entire universe. In KOTOR 1, you could redeem a Twi'lek who had freed herself from her awful slavers thanks to the dark side, by making her realize that under the Sith teachings, she was becoming someone as horrible or even more so than those enslavers. After overcoming the exams, we reach the interrogation chamber, where we find Vash imprisoned and dead. It was too optimistic to believe that all the lost Jedi would still be alive. It's a shame. In the recording of our exile, Vash seemed the wisest, and she's the one who has fallen. It's implied that Vash hit on Korriban because she wanted to unmask the Sith, unlike the other council members who were content to sit back and wait, but unfortunately, she succeeded. She found Sion, who was able to overpower her physically. Vash thought she could trick him, outsmart him. Sion isn't a genius, but he's no fool either. She underestimated him, and this is the result. When we turn around to head back to our ship, we come face to face with Sion. To our surprise, the first thing he does is warn us about a danger greater than himself. He makes it very clear that Kreia was his master, and he speaks of her as if she were a monster. He will try to kill us for 2 reasons. to prove he's better than us, as if he were competing for Kreia's love, but also to save us from her. He wants to show us mercy by killing us. Even though he's a Sith Lord, he's surprisingly weak. You'll be able to take him down very easily. And then the guy roars and his health is fully restored. That's how he defeated Vash. Darth Sion has made himself immortal through the Force. He's not strong, but he's invincible. It's time to flee to live another day. We could head back to our ship now and continue the story, but one of the best levels in the game is the cave I mentioned earlier, the only optional dungeon in the game. To enter, you must have a high Force alignment on either the light or dark side, which is a pain in the ass. As I said a while ago, for a game that's trying to criticize extremes, why do you block our way to the super cool optional dungeon if we're neutral? Damn it! Okay, let's just leave it at that and see what's so important about this place. Another thing I said a while back, and by a while back I mean at the very beginning of this retrospective, is that KOTOR 1 wanted to be A New Hope, and KOTOR 2, The Empire Strikes Back. This cave is where it's most noticeable, as it's a dark side site that throws challenges at us in the form of visions, like the iconic dark cave on Dagobah where Luke Skywalker unknowingly confronts himself in Vader's armor. The first vision takes us back to the moment when the Exile joined Malak to go to the Mandalorian Wars. You can roleplay this moment in different ways, with regret, with enthusiasm, or with the sadness that, despite knowing the decision to go to war will cause great suffering, it's the only possible choice. The alternatives are much worse. But this vision, which seems to represent the past, shifts, and Malak asks you, if you hadn't lost the Force, would you have joined them in a Jedi Civil War as well? Whatever you choose, the vision, partially or completely, will turn against you. One unique thing about this dungeon that they don't tell you, so it'll catch you by surprise, is that your Force doesn't regenerate. You recover it after each vision, but it doesn't regenerate naturally, so if you start throwing lightning or rely too much on Force healing, you can easily end up in an impossible situation. But if you die during a vision, you don't die completely. The vision fades and you survive with 1 health, but failure leaves you vulnerable to the dark side, and your alignment will plummet. If you're playing on the light side, it's much worse than simply dying and reloading the game. The second vision is a memory of Duxun. It's clear that one of the Exile's most dramatic moments during the war was when he ordered his soldiers to cross a minefield. Most of them died, and the offensive didn't even matter. It was just one of 50 feints. You can repeat your mistake or show growth by acting and saving the soldiers. It's a nice situation. A shame the game doesn't portray it well, because the only way to save the soldiers is either to manually disarm the mines, which makes you look bad, like couldn't you have done that the first time, or you eat the mines with your face and heal yourself with a Force or medpacks, which is just ridiculous. The good stuff starts with the following vision. The first 2 were from the past, the next 2 are from the future. Kreia and the rest of your party will eventually fight each other, and you have to choose a side. It's a good moment, but the best happens if you don't choose a side. Among all the possibilities, you can choose to stay on the sidelines, whether because you refuse to listen since all of this is a vision, or because you don't want to harm anyone. But if you choose that, you're unknowingly doing exactly what the Jedi Council did during the Mandalorian Wars. Refusing to act, thereby bringing suffering to others and rejecting your own growth, leading the vision to recite one of the game's most famous lines.
So you will do nothing? Apathy is death, worse than death, because at least a rotting corpse feeds the beasts and insects.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Apathy is death.
Statement: apathy is death.
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 That phrase is the heart of many of Kreia's philosophies. Whatever you do, you have to do something. Both the Jedi and the Sith refused to act, refused to evolve, tried to keep their attitudes and teachings frozen, and have died. A fate Kreia wants to save you from. After this, the game doesn't give you time to breathe. A couple more steps put you face to face with none other than yourself and Darth Revan. Your doppelganger is easily defeated, but Revan, the Sith who overcame apathy, the hero of the Mandalorian Wars, and the main character of KOTOR 1, is another story. I know the game makes an effort to balance itself so it's neither too easy nor too hard no matter the order in which you visit the planets, but I think something's up here, because normally Korriban is the last planet I go to and Revan hits hard but it's not a challenge. However, the last time I played, Korriban was my second planet, and holy shit, Revan kicked my ass! I had to put the game on easy to win. It's not complex enough to call it a secret boss, but it comes pretty close to the definition. Whether you win or lose, Revan simply vanishes. This encounter has been nothing but an omen. It will make sense when we meet Revan in the future. We can tell Kreia that we haven't learned anything from this, and she promises us that if that's the case, it's okay. We'll understand it later in life. When we return to the ship, you receive a Mandalorian message telling us that a civil war has broken out on Onderon and we should return. This message occurs when you've completed all the planets. It's the beginning of the end of Act 2. Once we finish Onderon and speak with Kabar, we will have finally reunited the Council. While we're on our way, let's talk to HK. A new dialogue unlocks after fighting Sion. HK has killed many Jedi and Sith, and he has advice on how to overcome his invincibility. Both HK and Adam talk about manipulating and abusing the connection to the Force of its users to catch them off guard. Pick up! Both HK and Adam talk about manipulating and abusing the connection to the Force of its users to catch them off guard. They both say that when facing a Jedi, it's a good idea to harm civilians or their Padawans, which makes them feel their pain through the Force, leaving them vulnerable. HK theorizes that the only way to defeat Sion is to weaken his connection to the Force. Since he has no loved ones, our only weapon would be words. Make him doubt his beliefs and his will until his mind is so weak that he can't summon the Force to heal himself. If we ask HK how it's possible that Sion achieved a kind of immortality, he argues that we demonstrate a similar power. After all, the exile and our companions suffer wounds constantly, yet we always heal quickly and effectively. HK is talking about the concept of the health bar and how wounds work in most games. It's disturbing to realize that perhaps our powers and Sion's aren't so different. We can also talk to Kreia. Despite how mysterious she's been, she has little trouble admitting that yes, she used to be a Sith Lord and was the master of both Sion and Nihilus, but like us, she lost her connection to the Force and was exiled. Now she's our master and at odds with them. This woman is an exile from the Sith, just as we are an exile from the Jedi. Kreia doesn't elaborate any further. This isn't enough information, but it will have to do for now. And at last, let the end begin by going to Onderon. The Mandalorians inform us that Queen Talia was about to secure victory, but Baklu has allied himself with the Sith. Kreia deduces that the Sith must have a base right here on Duxon. I haven't mentioned it, but during your first visit, there are several clues that something strange is happening on Onderon, such as animals acting more savagely. You'll have to split into two teams. One will go to the Royal Castle, the center of the war, to stop Baklu, and the other will have to disarm the Sith threat. I love this. Until now, you never had any reason to equip and level up more than 3 party members, but here you'll be fighting with 6 characters at once. It reminds me of Final Fantasy VI and how it split the party so everyone could participate. First, we see what happens to the secondary group, made up of the 3 allies you prefer, excluding Kreia and yourself. It starts off easy with a few mines and opportunities to use stealth, but soon you'll find yourself bombarded by officers, droids, and even some Sith. This is the final exam for your students. After all, by this point, you should have already turned into Jedi at least 3 of your party members. Adan, Mira, and the handmaiden or the disciple. Seeing these characters who started out as nobodies armed with lightsabers, channeling the mystical force and facing off against Sith is very satisfying. When you enter the temple, there will be fewer officers and droids, but more Sith. None of the battles are too difficult, and aside from the brawling, there are only a couple of optional puzzles to solve for items. It's not a particularly interesting dungeon. There is one side thing I like. You can encounter a dark side energy cyclone, and your team leader can ignore it, try to absorb it, or dissipate it. If you don't ignore it, you'll have to make a wisdom roll, I think. If you fail, you'll get a debuff for the rest of the dungeon, and if you succeed, a buff. It's just a little detail, but I'm glad it's here. There's a final fight, but it's only against slightly more powerful enemies. It's a shame it should have been a named character, someone at least semi-important to give this section more a proper boss. But whatever, you take out all the bad guys and move on to the main group. Kreia, you, and another companion of your choice drop into the middle of Isis on a Basilisk, a powerful Mandalorian war machine. So yes, ironically, the Exile, the Jedi who defeated the Mandalorians, uses their own strategy to save Onderon. In fact, some soldiers attack you in a panic, believing the Mandalorians are invading the planet again. The climb to the palace isn't a big deal. The only cool thing is that there's a moment when a group of enemy soldiers decides to flee rather than fight a Jedi Master. The palace itself is way cooler. You can do more than just combat, like improvising a heist and sneaking into the museum to steal several relics, but the best part is that one of the people who helped you save Daemon Gan from the false murder charge is an opportunist and has now joined Vaklu, taking on the role of hacker. If you try to interact with any computer, it sends you a message. Goodbye, Jedi, before it blows up in your face. In fact, until you reach him, you'll have to avoid all of the palace's technology since the hacker will use it against you. A welcome addition to what could have been just another boring combat section. I love how this moment is used to portray the exile as an almost invincible Jedi Master. On Peragus, we were running around naked with a lightsaber, barely able to use the Force and scared shitless. But now, look at Kavar's reaction when he finds out we've come.
An old student is returning. I don't think the Sith are going to know what hit them.
When you finally reach Talia, the game makes it very clear that the fight is over. Vaklu and his men are no match for a Jedi, let alone your team and Kavar. After the victory, Talia tries to execute Vaklu. It's curious how, despite being an execution, an act usually carried out by villains, the game treats it as the most logical and sensible decision. Vaklu even says that if his life is spared, he'll simply attempt another coup in the future no matter how much blood is spilled. Showing mercy is the Jedi light side decision, but everyone treats it like it's stupid. The answer is simple. This is a test. Did you really learn Kreia's lesson on Nar Shadda? How can it be kindness to show mercy to someone if it will only bring more suffering? By the way, I love how the great would-be dictator, when it dawns on him that he's about to be executed without a trial, starts begging for a fair legal process, even though he's killed countless people. Just 20 seconds ago, he was like, I'll be out of prison in no time and I'll kill you all. But now he's like, you can't do that, it's illegal. Whatever you do, the Queen thanks you for your help and you finally have a moment of peace to talk with Kavar. Unfortunately, it's the least interesting conversation of the three Jedi. Kes Khalil had his whole dilemma about having given up and being painfully aware of the Jedi's flaws. Vrook was the embodiment of these flaws and revealed that there was something strange about our Force powers. Kavar is basically just a dude. He treats you with respect and answers your questions, but he doesn't know anything useful, and he won't tell us what the hell cut off our connection to the Force until the entire council is together. But hey, at least we're about to get there. Kavar leaves and we'll meet him, Vrook, and Kes Khalil on Dantooine to solve this mystery once and for all and take the fight to the Sith. While we're talking to Kavar, Kreia continues her manipulations, but for the first time, she directs them at someone outside the group. Kreia rescues Colonel Tolbin, Vaklu's loyal second-in-command, and orders him to tell the Sith Lord who delivered the troops that there are Jedi hidden on Telos. This is a lie. There's only one Jedi there, Atris. With this act, Kreia is condemning With this action, Kreia is condemning the entire planet to destruction. Why? We'll know soon. With this in mind, we head to Dantooine. It's a walk filled with tension and anticipation. Will we finally find out what cut us off from the Force? Is it really so important that the entire council needed to be together to tell us? Why has Kreia put Telos in danger of being devoured by Nihilus? When we finally enter what used to be the Jedi Academy, Kreia does something very curious. For a moment, she drops her mask and allows us to see her for what she truly is. A tired old woman. If we have enough perception, we can see why. Kreia is afraid. She tells us that this meeting with the council, a parallel to the one that ended in our exile, is a critical moment in our story, and, like a mother forced to let her son face danger, she watches us walk away, frightened. Finally, the council tells us why we lost the Force, but it's something so extraordinary that they have to start by explaining other things. It turns out that our protagonist has a unique power, which, if I'm not mistaken, hasn't been seen in any other Star Wars product. The Exile has a natural ability to forge bonds with the Force. To understand this power, the Council tells us to simply look at those around us. In many aspects, KOTOR 2 is a deconstruction of the RPG genre. This conversation is basically explaining that every mechanic we take for granted because it's normal in an RPG is actually a terrifying power of our own. What do we assume in an RPG? Well, people join your party. If you think about it, isn't it weird that Visas goes from trying to kill us to a loyal ally in minutes? Beodor abandoned his long mission to stop Zerka without hesitation to help you. And Mandalore has abandoned all the Mandalorians under his command. We also assume that the party leader makes the decisions. If we kill someone for no reason, the other characters help us. Later, kind-hearted characters like the Handmaiden or the Disciple appear surprised. They don't understand why they obeyed us, why they participated in this evil act. It's because we're unintentionally manipulating them through our bond. Mira used to pride herself on not killing anyone, but ever since she's with us, she kills without hesitation. We also take for granted experience points. In a game, when you kill an enemy, you gain experience. With enough experience, you level up. We don't think about it, but in real life, a person who grows stronger the more they kill is a terrifying idea. And that's exactly what the Exile is to the Council. Someone terrifying. After all, we've spent the entire game fighting, killing, and growing stronger. Not just us, but our companions too, who share our experience through our bond. That's why people who have never trained in the Force in their lives can shoot lightning in just a few days. That's why Rook couldn't sense the Force in us, because it wasn't our Force. It's the Force of other beings we've killed and the Force of those who are bonded with us. How did we recover the Force? The answer is that we never did. Just as we have a parallel to Sion's power called the Health Bar, we have a parallel to Nihilus' power called experience points, levels, and party members. This game was made 11 years before Undertale. We do not have the Force. We have a wound in the Force. We are a wound in the Force. On Malachor V, we were connected to the Jedi fighting there, and when we activated the Shadow Mass generator, as everyone died horribly, the Exile felt all those deaths, all that pain. He had to choose, either die with the Force or live without it. That's the answer to how we lost the Force. And we're not the only ones. The Sith Lords who threaten us, Sion, Nihilus, and the one who has yet to be revealed, were also on Malachor V. Their extraordinary powers share the same origin as ours, an unknown force that arose from an unprecedented tragedy. All this time, we were the ones who cut ourselves off from the Force. And this, in the Council's eyes, means we are no longer Jedi. A Jedi is sacrifice. A Jedi does not fear death. A Jedi would have let that bond kill us, but the Exile was afraid to die and turned away from the Force. The Council debates that this was a fall, but someone thinks otherwise.
You were deafened.
At last, you could hear.
You were broken.
You were whole.
You were blinded.
And at last, you saw.
After all this, the Council decides what they're going to do, and they make the worst possible decision!
We will do as we have done. We will wait.
Are you fucking kidding me? Yes, after all of this, the Council decides to do nothing to wait for the Sith to act. Bravo! Bravo! What really pisses me off is that Vrook is the one leading the other two, the brave and kind Kavar and the introspective Kes Khalil, who saw the Jedi's mistakes for some reason. They both let themselves be influenced and dragged along by that idiot Vrook. And on top of that, since they see in us an unnatural form of the Force, they decide to exile us. Again! But this time, because we've regained a semblance of the Force, now they actually want to cut us off from it. And then our savior arrives. Kreia shits on these three like they're nothing. How dare they call us deaf and blind, when Kes Khalil ignored the suffering of the refugees on Nar Shadda, when Vrook refuses to see the Jedi's failure even as he walks through the ruins of their temples, when Kavar, despite all his efforts, failed to detect the presence of a dark Sith temple so close to the kingdom he was protecting. The Exile brings with him a new power, a new way of doing things, the salvation of the galaxy, but the Jedi, in their arrogance, blind and deaf, call everything they don't understand evil. This trial of us becomes a trial of the Jedi. Kreia delivers her verdict.
As you would pass judgment on him, I have come to pass judgment on you all. Do you wish to feel the teachings born of the Mandalorian Wars? Of all tragedies that scream across the galaxy? Let me show you. You, who have forever seen the galaxy through the Force. See it through the eyes of the Exile.
While we knew what life without the Force was like, the Jedi did not. Dogmatic and extremist, when Kreia strips them of the Force, they cease to live. More than that, when we interact with them, the description of their corpses says that they are more than dead. Being so dependent on the Force, its loss has left them empty. These men will not return as ghosts. They could have survived like we did, but they prefer to die, believing themselves to be masters rather than live in reality. It's been a while, ever since we spoke with Keskhalil on Nar Shadda, that I mentioned there was something about these Jedi that make Luke Skywalker from Episode 8 look good in comparison. At the beginning of that movie, Luke has cut himself off from the Force despite being one of the most powerful Jedi in history. Luke would have survived Kreia's curse without any trouble, since his philosophy and knowledge are hundreds of times above those of Brooke, Kavar, and Keskhalil. This sequence is brilliant. The answer to several mysteries was right before our eyes, hidden in the very mechanics of the RPG. We experienced the Jedi's mistakes firsthand in this scene. If you still didn't understand why the Jedi had to fall, now you do. Kreia finally lays all her cards on the table, and although we still lack some context, you can guess what she wants. She wants us, who possess this extraordinary power, to bring the end of both the Jedi and the Sith. The fact that Kreia allowed this reunion implies that she was giving Keskhalil, Brooke, and Kavar the opportunity to evolve. If these three had questioned their beliefs and joined the exile, Kreia wouldn't have killed them. But their stubborn, misguided existence posed a threat not only to the galaxy, but to her most beloved student. As Nihilus approaches Telos, Kreia manipulates the handmaiden into returning to Atris, who suspiciously hasn't come to this meeting. When we finally recover, the truth has granted us ultimate power. If we are on the light side, we gain Force Enlightenment, a power that grants us 4 buffs in a single turn. If we are on the dark side, we get Force Crush, a powerful attack, although it's still more optimal to use lightning. And speaking of the dark side, if you're playing as an evil character, you've probably killed the Jedi instead of gathering them. In that case, instead of shitting on them, Kreia shits on you. It's not a bad scene, but the one we just saw is 100 times better. The main reason why I go with the light side when I play KOTOR 2. To wrap things up, as you return to Telos to speak with Atris one last time before Kreia and her start slapping each other, you have a final conversation with a member of your party. If you're male, it's Visas. If you're female, it's Disciple. But basically, both tell you the same thing. You confess to them the existence of your bond, how people you thought were friends are by your side because of an invisible manipulation. But Visas and the Disciple argue that perhaps this is something beautiful. If this bond has made them better, why would that be a bad thing? If these powers that the Jedi call horrible allow you to help others, what does their origin matter? Sion and Nihilus use their powers selfishly, but we have used them for good. Visas and the Disciples say, where others see the death of the Force, I see life. In my opinion, that's the best interpretation. We, Sion, Nihilus, and Kreia all share extraordinary abilities born from the echo of Malachor V. But what determines whether they are a gift or a curse, an omen of hope or one of death, is the choices we make, how we choose to use our powers. One last thing I should mention is that this conversation has a slightly romantic tone. This game doesn't handle romance like its predecessor, or like Mass Effect and many other RPGs would later do. Here, depending on whether you play as a man or a woman, 3 different characters of the opposite sex fall in love with you, 2 party members and 1 enemy. The interesting thing is that this love isn't just love, it's merely an expansion of already existing feelings. If you're a man, the handmaiden, Visas, and Atris love you. If you're a woman, it's Aden, the Disciple, and Sion. For example, Atris felt great admiration for us, but when we went to war, going against her ideals, she felt betrayed. If we're female, that's that. But if we're male, there was some sort of attraction in that admiration, adding that dynamic to your relationship. As a man, Adam sees redemption in us. To achieve it, he's prepared to watch our backs and protect us from all danger. If you're playing as a woman, all of this still holds true. It's simply that Adam is now also attracted to you, both physically and emotionally, to the point of asking Beodur for advice and being mocked by T3 in a hilarious scene. But we can't reciprocate any of these romances given the extreme situation we find ourselves in. Also, some dialogue implies that the exile, as a Jedi, isn't properly educated in matters of the heart and simply doesn't realize that these people are attracted to him or her. The only romance we can more or less acknowledge is with Visas in this scene, but I wouldn't even count that. Kreia convinced the handmaiden to take it to Atris by mixing truth and lies. She finally admits that she is the last hidden Sith, but also says that the Council has killed the exile and that she is ready to submit to the judgment of the last Jedi, Atris. We could ask why Kreia is doing all this, but the brief conversation between Kreia and Atris reveals that mostly just to fuck with everyone. It's funny how fascinating Kreia's character and philosophies are when much of her actions could be said to be just for the sake of causing trouble. Kreia forces Atris to look at herself and delivers one of the best lines in the game.
Never battle that called to you, never battle that caused you to fall. Malachor V has touched many things and it casts its echoes still.
Why did he betray me?
You betrayed yourself. Do not blame the exile. It is such a quiet thing to fall, but far more terrible is to admit it.
Soon we will see that this is Atris' great drama. She fell to the dark side long ago, but refused to accept it. She committed horrible acts and put on a powerful mask of virtue to deceive herself. When we think of bad people in the real world, they are more likely to be like Atris than like more typical villains such as Vader and the Emperor. While Kreia is getting into her head, the Handmaiden tries to talk to her sisters, but they refuse to even try to understand her. Just as the Jedi Council treated us like shit, the Handmaiden's sisters treat her like shit, claiming she's a traitor to Atris for letting the exile teach her the ways of the Force. Controlling the Handmaiden, we have a very satisfying battle in which we defeat all her sisters at once. Thanks to the adventure she's experienced, far from Atris' false teachings, she's gone from being the weakest of them to stronger than all of them combined. Then Atris appears, even more violent and extreme than when we first saw her at the beginning of this long adventure. The Handmaiden and Atris duel, but Atris wins when she reveals she can use Force Lightning, a dark side power. We show up just in time to save her and we prepare to speak with Atris. This time, no masks or lies. Thanks to Kreia, Atris is finally honest with herself and with us, and fuck, she couldn't be more different from the Jedi image she presented before. It turns out that Atris, like Escalil, saw that the Jedi's actions were not right, but instead of accepting it, she pretty much went insane. She fell to the dark side in secret without even realizing it herself. When the Jedi Council met on Kotor, she leaked the meeting. Darth Nihilus found out because of Atris. All this time, Atris has been directly responsible for more Jedi deaths than we have. Of course, Atris hoped this would reveal the presence of the hidden Sith. She didn't expect Nihilus to act so quickly and effectively, so he killed all the Jedi and returned to his hiding place before anyone learned of his existence. It was all for nothing. And Atris, instead of repenting or anything, leaked our location. Darth Sion and his assassins attacked us on Peragus because of Atris. Atris is to blame for everything bad that happens in this game. The first time we spoke, she had the nerve to look us in the face and act haughty, when she's probably the second character who's caused the most innocent deaths after Nihilus himself. But okay, now that she's no longer lying to us or herself, what? What's her answer? That we suck. How is that possible? How can she still say the same? The only progress is that instead of insulting only us, she insults all the Jedi and all the Sith. You might realize during this conversation why Atris behaves this way. Atris even now refuses to admit her mistakes, which are growing exponentially. It's not my fault I didn't go to war, it's your fault for leaving. It's not my fault I leaked the meeting at Kotor, it's Nihilus' fault for killing them all. It's not my fault I feel anger and sadness, it's the Jedi's fault for not knowing how to educate. She's so confident despite her horrible mistakes that she vows to start a new generation of Force users in her own image, which would be obviously horrible. Throughout this entire game we've been talking about the arrogance of the Jedi. Well, Atris is what happens when a Sith is arrogant. The wars are over. To avenge the Jedi of Kotor and save the Handmaiden, we must fight. The battle is almost comically easy, I suspect on purpose. Atris was a historian, not a warrior. So much confidence, so much suffering, and the final conflict ends in seconds. Defeated in every way, Atris finally sheds some of her ego. Explains to the exile that yes, Kreia is the last of the hidden Sith, Darth Traya, the betrayer. After breaking Atris, she has returned to her place of origin. There's no need to even say its name. all the hidden Sith and the exile were reborn in the same place, where we'll have to return to end the triumvirate once and for all, Malachor V. According to Atris, Kreia is going to use the wound in the Force on Malachor V to destroy the Force, which would mean the death of countless beings. Many people hear this and believe it. It's one of the first things people talk about when discussing Kreia, but we shouldn't forget that this woman lies more than she speaks. I'll talk about it when we get there, but I want to point out for now that I think Kreia made it up to get you to go to Malachor V to face her. But first, we have to stop Nihilus, who, tipped by Colonel Tolbin thanks to Kreia, is coming to Telos, believing there's an entire Jedi Academy to feed on, when it's just Atris. We can choose Atris' final fate. We can kill her, leave her cruelly locked up here, forcing her to listen to Sith holocrons until she dies, or forgive her. You might think it's absurd to let her live after everything that's happened, but as has been the case so far, this game knows how to make the light side satisfying. Unlike Vaklu, Atris, finally defeated, is aware of the suffering she has caused. If we forgive her, Atris swears she will leave everything behind and exile herself. She imposes on herself the verdict we received so long ago. Perhaps in a few years, after becoming one with the galaxy instead of a distant witness, Atris may once again be a Jedi. After the duel, we meet with the Handmaiden. Upon learning how low the one she called her master had fallen, her loyalty shifts entirely. She is now a Jedi, like her mother, like us, and at last reveals her name, Brianna. In what other game does it take you so long to hear the name of one of your allies? You only hear that name once here, and I'm not really sure why, but it feels special. It's time to face Darth Nihilus. But before that, let's have some fun with HK. I've been putting this off for as long as possible, but no more, it has to be now. KOTOR 2 was released in 2004, just 1 year after the first game. Obsidian was asked to make a full game in very little time. When Obsidian saw that the project's scope and ambition were growing, they asked for more time, but were denied. This caused KOTOR 2 to be released with many bugs and a very rushed and bad ending. A big part of why so many found it a disappointing sequel is that the finale was an incomplete, almost incomprehensible mess. And a big part of why so many people love the game now is the restoration content mod. Obsidian left a ton of unfinished scenes and sequences in the code, recorded but unused dialogue and even entire levels. After the game's release, Obsidian begged to add all of this via patches, but they were told, no! Fuck the players! Some people think that treating consumers badly is a recent thing. No, it's been happening forever. The mod brings back many of those scenes and sequences and one of the levels. There are a couple of things where the mod is counterproductive. I'll point them out as we go along. The reason I'm talking about this now is that without the mod, almost everything we've seen so far is practically the same whether it's installed or not. The only significant difference is that, without the mod, the battle for Dantooine is much shorter, simpler, and easier. The mod improves it a lot. Without the mod, we'd go straight to the battle for Telos against Nihilus. But with the mod, as long as we've discovered the location of the HK-50 factory, we get a level where HK-47 heads to the factory to destroy his inferior offsprings. The problem is that it kills the vibe. It really sucks. Going from Atris to Nihilus was fitting and intense. Inserting this level in between, which has more of a comedic tone, I like that this level exists, but they should have found another place to put it. But hey, it's better to include it, because depending on what happens in this level, several characters will have a different ending. Without the mod, since you can't go to the level, those characters would always get their worst ending. Well, about the level itself, I think the first part is excellent. Since HK-47 and the HK-50s share the same model, they are unable to attack each other. Their programming considers them the same entity and prohibits them from harming themselves. To advance past the first part of the dungeon, you must deactivate a reactor, but the HK-50s warn you over the intercom that doing so would be bad for them, preventing you from deactivating it. So you have to turn off the speakers and go to a mechanical droid that will make you forget what the HK-50s have told you, allowing you to deactivate the reactor. Then you go to the same mechanical droid to have it remove the programming that prevents you from harming yourself, which is a bit of a deus ex machina, but I'll take it, and it turns every HK-50 in the second half of the dungeon into an enemy. And that's what kind of fucks this level up. You only control HK-47, and unless you put together a super well thought out and equipped mega crit build, you're going to have a very hard time. How funny the dialogue is ends up forgotten while slowly advancing through dozens of strong enemies. Don't forget that the 1 HK50 on Peragus and the 3 on Telos were considered bosses, and now you have an entire level of them. In the end, I end up activating my shields and running while the HKs shoot at me until I reach the end of the factory, where you can do one of two things. You discover that they were already planning a new model, the HK51s, so you can either destroy them all or load your programming into them, creating an army of HK51s loyal to the progenitor 47. I like this scene where HK47 proclaims himself leader of this new and dangerous faction even more now because he had a shield activated that makes him look like a cybernetic demon. All praise Darth HK47! After this, we finally return to the exile. The people we've helped during our adventure come to defend Telos. Since I've been nice, we team up with the militia we trained on Dantooine, the Onderon army, and the Mandalorians. A brief but satisfying reunion. It's proof that we've strengthened this wooden galaxy. We form our team and Beodor isn't here. Welcome to the section we're going to call Not Even the Restoration Mod Could Save Beodor. Beodor could have been the second most important character after Kreia, but for some reason the game mistreats and ignores him. For starters, he's the weakest character in your entire party, so you won't want to use him. His conversion to Jedi is the hardest to pull off, despite being the simplest narratively and offering the fewest combat benefits. Becoming a Jedi Guardian doesn't strengthen him much. All of this despite the fact that Beodor is absolutely essential to this game's plot. He is the engineer who created the Shadow Mass Generator, the weapon of mass destruction you used to end the Mandalorian Wars, the weapon that wounded Malachor V, that massive wound that tore into your very being and whose scream echoed through the galaxy. That's why Beodor shows so much remorse, so much doubt about his role in the war. He's just as responsible for those deaths as you are, and the game barely even mentions it. Cool! But even the Restoration mod couldn't save Beodor section started because he isn't in the party. Why isn't he present? Because he is dead. Very dead. Caput. Finito. Muerto. You see, it turns out that in the first drafts of the plot, Beodor sacrifices himself to get HK47 into the factory and dismantle the HK50s. That's a shitty death for a character who should be so important. I imagine they wanted to rewrite all of this, but since they had to rush the game out, it stayed like that. And there wasn't even enough of that to restore it with the mod. Even with it from your point of view, Beodor just disappears. Poof! And people like me had to go online and research to figure out what the hell happened to him. But well, let's go beat the shit out of Nihilus already. Between HK47 and Beodor, we've gotten a bit sidetracked. After a short section where we fight on Telos, we managed to punch a hole in Nihilus' ship and get inside. In this offensive, we can't choose our party. We have to go with Visas and Mandalore. I don't like being forced to use a specific party, but I understand why. When you play with the mod, it's obvious they try to give each party member a moment of glory. The Handmaiden defeats her sisters and faces Atris. HK47 defeats his copies. Beodor dies alone, and Visas and Mandalore confront Nihilus. The dungeon itself is nothing special, you just make your way through a simple setting with lots of enemies. This time, it's the Sith, so it should be more dangerous, but by now you should be super strong and able to take them down without much trouble. There are 3 things that stand out. First, you need to place 4 protons at strategic points on the ship so that, on your return, the Mandalorians can destroy it. But one of them is attacked by the Sith, so you have to create a proton yourself using the ship's gadgets. I like that plans go awry and you have to improvise during the level. Also, I love how the embarrassed Mandalorian apologizes for his failure, and the angry Mandalore responds, "Don't kill yourself until I tell you to." Second, we can meet with Colonel Tolbin. We must not forget that, although Kreia gave the warning, it was Tolbin who so happily went to Nihilus that there were Jedi on Telos. The man we fight here couldn't be more different. It turns out that Nihilus is so hungry that he consumes the life energy of those around him. Tolbin is more dead than alive, and at last he understands that Nihilus doesn't care about Onderon's independence. For Nihilus, Onderon, Baklu, Tolbin, they were all tools to sate his hunger, nothing more. We can use this to convince Tolbin to switch sides. After all, when Nihilus realizes there are no Jedi on Telos, he'll probably go after Onderon for revenge. Tolbin switches sides and helps us destroy the ship. Even someone as miserable as Tolbin is aware that the primordial evil Nihilus represents must be stopped. Finally, we can go to Visas' old bedroom. There, she confronts her old thoughts with the new ones she discovered on her adventure with us, and emerges with renewed strength. At last, we stand before Nihilus, the Galactus of Star Wars, this great threat that has been tormenting us since we first met Visas on Nar Shadda. Despite all the power we've gained, Nihilus immobilizes us with a single wave of his hand. We can't do anything against them. But then, he tries to feed on us, the powerful Jedi exile. He doesn't know that we are a wound in the Force, we are empty. By trying to feed on the void, he grows hungrier, weaker, weak enough to be defeated. That's why Kreia tricked Nihilus into coming to Telos, because she knew we would face him, she knew he would try to feed on us, and she knew he would suffer for it. Nihilus is like the Jedi Council, unable to let go of the Force no matter how much suffering it causes him. Kreia knew that we and our wound were the only ones who could defeat him. It's time to end this once and for all. This battle isn't all that great either. Okay, for once we have a full party, which makes it more fun, and Nihilus is stronger than Atreus, but his attacks don't do much damage and he doesn't have any special or powerful force powers. It's like facing any other Sith, but a bit stronger. This makes the mid-fight cutscene come off a bit cheesy. It suggests that we're having an incredibly intense, epic confrontation, so much so that you can kill Visas or convince her to commit suicide, because just as Kreia and you are connected by a force bond between master and apprentice, Visas and Nihilus are similarly bonded, and Visas' death causes Nihilus great pain, weakening him even further. But since the fight is easy, this scene, which could have been really cool, ends up being somewhat ridiculous. After a little more fighting, we finish him off. It's over. We can ask Visas to remove her master's mask and tell us what was behind it.
A man. Nothing more.
I haven't heard any official explanation of what this means, but I think it's relatively simple. Kreia constantly talks about how the Jedi and Sith end up relying so heavily on the Force that they become unable to live without it, even though most of the galaxy can. At the end of the day, the Force is power, and even someone with good intentions can end up addicted to it, unable to understand what it's like to be someone who is afraid, weak, powerless. The Exile and Kreia were able to sever their connection to the Force to survive. The Jedi Council was unable and died because of it. Nihilus could have saved himself from his hunger by renouncing the Force, but he didn't. He was a slave to it. Nihilus was never a terrible and spectacular cosmic entity. No, he was a man addicted to power. Nothing more. Before escaping, Canderous and Visas have a conversation in which Canderous admits how difficult it was to lose Revan, but the worst part was that Revan implied that the Mandalorian Wars weren't the Mandalorians' idea, that someone had used them to weaken the Jedi and the Republic. That great conflict that not only destroyed so many lives but also split the once unified Mandalorian race didn't even originate from them, but from a hidden dark force. Although Mandalore or Canderous takes pride in the fact that the Mandalorians have proven themselves capable of conquering a Sith ship, he knows that this is only the beginning. Upon returning to Telos, we have a tiny moment of calm before the storm. General Cardo Nassi, Revan's companion from the first game, thanks us for our help and asks if we know where Revan is. Sadly, we reply that we don't. Even now, so close to the end of the game, that question we asked ourselves when we saw T3 on the Ebon Hawk after selecting New Game remains unanswered. After leaving, Bastila also appears and speaks briefly with Karth. It's cool to see these two characters who are as important to the first KOTOR as Revan himself, and it's sad to see them so depressed by the separation of their trinity. Now, it's time for the big finale. With Telos saved from Nihilus, we have two more Sith to defeat, and we know where one of them is. Using the Force itself as a hostage, Kreia, or Darth Traya, awaits us in the depths of Malachor V. The journey to Malachor is tense and terrifying. The Exile's power continues to grow. We can read the thoughts of the party members, as Kreia taught us. They are all appropriately afraid to get to the source of their suffering, to the center of the echo.
Their lives. Like I lost my family at Malachor V. And Father left me, left us all, when he lost all that he loved at Malachor V.
We go now, my master, to that dark place which made you. Where you gained your ship, your troops. Your ship, my prison, that you dragged from the gravity well at Malachor V.
Wish I'd never met him. Wish I'd died there. but the storms have dragged me down into Malachor V.
We will not surrender. We will not die.
Your command echoes still, General, and I obey, as I did at Malachor V. Now Malachor V comes to us, and I wish to face it this last time. You know where you must go. It calls to you still.
It is the heartbeat of the past.
And she must be stopped, there, now, or she will bring the screams of Malachor V to the galaxy, just as we carry the echo all this way.
This small moment serves to finally make the player understand why Malachor V is so important. If you haven't played the game, you probably haven't noticed that I've used the word echo a lot. The game itself does it constantly, so much so that it even makes you laugh when you play it again. What that echo means is basically the butterfly effect, how one decision can have unforeseen consequences. The exile on Beodor's decision to use the Shadow Mass generator has had consequences for the entire galaxy, including, as we have just seen, our allies. Malachor V became the epicenter of a powerful echo that can still be heard throughout the galaxy, an echo we must confront in order to heal it and move on with our lives. We've talked a lot about Malachor V, but at last we see it. A rock of eternal storms and volcanic eruptions. If a planet could get sick and suffer, this would be the result. The storm makes the ship land poorly. All the characters except D3 are thrown out and crash land in different parts of the planet. How is this possible for this to happen without them dying? A wizard did it. It's kind of stupid, but it makes all the characters end up alone in this final challenge, which is excellent and lets those who haven't had their moment of glory yet to get it. We begin, of course, with the exile. We move across the planet. I've spoken very highly of the presentation, but look, there are several reasons why many people have a negative opinion of this ending, especially without the restoration mod. One thing the mod doesn't fix is that this isn't a good level. Keep moving forward, there are strong monsters but they shouldn't be too much of a problem given your high level. That's it. There's a moment when you get a little scared because they lock you in with a big monster, but that's it. There's no exploration, no traps, and you can't use your abilities to change your path or eliminate enemies without fighting. Zero. And of course, the fact that you're going solo with the exile instead of a full party is the icing on the cake. I want to make it clear that I love the ending, but not because of the gameplay. Whenever no one's talking, I feel a bit like a zombie, walking forward without thinking about anything. We find Malachor's Sith Academy, the Sith Triumvirate's Academy, where Darth Traya and Darth Sion await. So, we move on to the moment when other allies take center stage. I haven't said it, but on Nar Shadda, Kriya saved Hanhar with the intention of having him serve as Mira's final test. Hanhar has been hunting on Malachor ever since, growing incredibly powerful in this harsh land. You have a one-on-one fight between Mira and Hanhar, which is comically easier than the first, since Mira is now a Jedi and can defend herself properly. I'd care about this moment if it weren't starring Mira, the most boring character in the game. The other moment in the spotlight belongs to Remote? Another thing I haven't mentioned because it wasn't relevant, Beodor had a little support droid called Remote. It doesn't speak, although he has a couple of funny cutscenes with the other droids in the party. Since Beodor is dead for some reason, his role is passed to Remote. It turns out that, aware that everything would end on Malachor, he ordered Remote that, if he gets the chance, to deactivate the Shadow Mass generator to put an end to the Malachor wound. So we have to control Remote to find 4 Republic ship remains and use their energy to reactivate their generator. I hope you explored and killed every enemy when you were controlling the Exile, because if you didn't, they'll still be there and it'll make the difference between a Lazarus Stroll and the most terrifying, unfair stealth mission you've ever played. Remote can't withstand a single hit, so any enemies you left alive will pose a serious threat. When this odyssey ends, Goto appears to stop Remote. I don't really get it, but Goto insists that healing Malachor would bring anarchy to the galaxy. If I've missed something, please explain it to me. And then comes the Chad HK, whom I haven't even mentioned until now. Damn, things are piling up. He spends the entire game calling Goto fat, and I don't know about you, but seeing one droid insult another for its shape, which has nothing to do with its competence, and, as droids, they shouldn't even be able to feel insecure about their appearance, makes me laugh. There are 3 possible outcomes to this confrontation. If HK didn't go to the factory, Goto hacks him and destroys Remote. Since the factory wasn't in the original version of the game, this would always be the end for these characters, and it was a real kick in the nuts that the adorable Remote and the beloved HK were killed by the fat ball. If HK went to the factory, it doesn't matter whether he destroys it or uses it to create HK-51s. He'll be able to confront Godo, and Godo will be the one destroyed. The first 2 times I played this game, it was without the mod, and the fact that the bad ending was the only one really annoyed me. Playing with the restoration mod is practically mandatory, even if only to save Remote and HK. While the Exile enters the academy, our allies have already reached its depths. And this is where the game was supposed to deliver a moral lesson, but even the mod couldn't completely fix it. I've been saying for a long time that both the Jedi and the Sith have had their teachings perverted because blah 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 blah, but this is where the game tells you, yeah, but being good is better than being bad. Let's not go so far into the center that we become idiots. Supposedly, if you made it this far with your dark side allies, they would take advantage of the separation to turn on each other, trying to eliminate those they hate. For example, this possible conversation between Atton and the Disciple is still in the game.
Hey kid.
Atton, the Exile, where is she?
She's safe. You don't need to worry about her. You never did, really.
You know how long it's been since I killed a Jedi? You get a taste for it, you know? I killed a bunch here on Malachor, while the planet was dying. Killing a half-Jedi like you should hold me over until the next one comes along. They always do, you know.
Atton, Kreia is using you.
Really? I had no idea. Everyone uses each other, kid. And if she's using me to kill you, as I see it, I really don't lose anything.
I already lost what mattered to me. I wanted to protect her, to help her, and then you show up, playing hero. Fine.
Atton, the feelings between the Exile and I...
Doesn't matter. Not anymore. I had forgotten how much I hate Jedi. And the less of you that are in the galaxy, the better. Ready to die, kid?
I won't fight you, Atton.
I don't care, I just want you to die.
I assume that Visas and the Handmaiden would similarly face each other to the death, and Beodor and Mandalore would have worked too if Beodor hadn't died, etc. But if you're on the light side, instead of fighting each other, they team up, and thank goodness this was actually restored. I love seeing your students come together to confront Kreia. Their grudges are set aside to fight evil. Atton, Mira, Visas, and the Handmaiden or the Disciple team up, but they can't do anything against Kreia. 4 apprentices cannot overcome a master. However, this scene shows us that Kreia may not be entirely evil. Even after revealing herself as the last Sith, it seems that being a teacher takes precedence. She lets the group live and even criticizes the Handmaiden or the Disciple for throwing themselves into danger, potentially to their deaths, before confessing their feelings to the Exile. Atton, the smartest of the 4 and aware of how powerful a Jedi Master or Sith Lord can be, bolts when he sees it's impossible to win. However, all he manages to do is run into Sion, but this time he doesn't back down.
And I get the fool.
Funny. That's just what I was thinking.
The last party member to have his moment of glory is Atton, and damn what a moment! Remember Telos, where we fled in terror from Sion, when we thought Atton was just a knockoff Han Solo, and now Atton is facing him in a lightsaber duel. And this fight is perhaps the most important in the game because it's the only one where being defeated isn't a game over. Sion isn't strong just like his battle on Korriban, but there were 3 of you then, and here it's just Atton. It's more than possible that Sion will be a challenge. If you manage to reduce his health to 0, as on Korriban, Sion regenerates quickly, but Atton takes advantage of the moment to escape. If you lose, Atton is left defenseless against Sion, who proceeds to torture him to death. It's a hard ending to watch, but strangely fitting, even Atton thinks so. Atton tortured and killed Jedi. When he discovered he was Force sensitive, he fled in terror of suffering that fate, but his path may still lead him back to square one, to endure exactly what he feared. Win or lose, we're back with the Exile, this time inside the Academy. Surprise! It's as boring and simple, like the surface of Malachor but with Sith instead of monsters. Endless corridors and rooms, devoid of detail but filled with enemies. Damn it! I know they had to rush the game out, but would it have been so hard to do something to make the final level less boring? And just like with the HK-47 factory, the mod has added something to the game that I don't think it should have. You can find your allies locked up after their defeat. You can free them, or kill them. Why? I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. Even if you've played like a psychopath throughout the entire game, you're aware that having tools at your disposal is an advantage. This feels like an idea someone had along the lines of, wow, imagine that at the end of the game, you can be so evil that you can betray and kill your own party. And they threw it in with the intention of polishing it later, but that moment never came. The mod shouldn't have bothered restoring this, it's stupid. If you free them, you order Mandalore to protect your weakened apprentices. They won't matter at all in your final confrontation. This might be the beginning of their story, but it's the end of yours, and you'll have to fight alone. When we finally reach the end of the academy, Darth Sion stands in our way. This guy has been chasing us for even longer than Nihilus. He's been there since literally the beginning of the game. He's the first character you see, watching us from the title screen. At last, we face him. Sion tells us pretty much the same thing he did on Korriban, but now we know the entire context. We know who Kreia is, and we know the origin of both our powers and his. The terrifying Sion now is kind of pathetic. Unlike Nihilus, he doesn't consider us a threat, at least not compared to Kreia. Sion understands that what Kreia desires most is for her lessons, her teachings, her philosophy to survive, to endure, to prove she was right. And what better way to do that than for her beloved student to become the most powerful Force user in the galaxy. Sion intends to kill us not only to proclaim himself Kreia's best student, he wants to kill us to spite her, to hurt her by presenting our corpse to her. But our story won't end like this. The Exile will always be much stronger than Adam, so we'll take care of Sion quickly. But of course, it's pointless. As soon as his health reaches 0, he regenerates. Sion swears he can hold on forever, until we collapse from exhaustion, with one of the best lines in the game.
I can die 100 times, Exile, and still I will rise again as strong as before.
As we discussed with HK, the only way to defeat Sion is to sever his connection to the Force by attacking his ideals instead of his body. Each time you reduce his health to 0, you talk to him while he regenerates. You can use various skills such as persuasion or perception to present arguments that show Sion is wrong. During the conversation, it becomes clear that Sion is the exact opposite of the Jedi. While the Jedi didn't know how to live without the Force, Sion doesn't know how to die. Yes, through extraordinary power he has managed to survive, but so what? He lives in eternal suffering, causing suffering. Your words can make Sion see that he hasn't extended his life. He has prolonged his death by becoming a slave to power, while we were able to let it go, ironically becoming the master of our own power. That's why Kreia loves us and rejects Sion. We win the duel of words. We defeat the immortal by making him see that he needs to die.
Will not fall. I cannot die.
You have fallen, and you are dead. You only must admit it.
Why? Why did she choose you? What makes you able to defeat me? Defeat me here?
In giving up the Force, one can gain strengths that would be impossible otherwise.
It is not possible to walk away from such things unscarred. To keep living when the universe dies around you.
Face death and keep standing. It leaves scars, yes, but it leaves room to heal.
The Force is who I am. The dark side fills me. It is what I am.
The Force fills an empty, shattered shell. There is little left of the men you once were. You know this. What kind of life have you lived with the Force flowing through you? Was it worth living?
It was not. No matter how many I killed, there was no end to the pain. The blades the Force tore through my flesh. I am glad to leave this place, at last.
Absolute cinema. What does it matter that the combat in this game is a bit of a joke when the dialogue, the atmosphere, and the emotional weight of the duel are so powerful? I remember the first time I played this and I heard Sion's body hit the ground amid the sepulchral silence of Malachor V. I didn't feel like I'd defeated a villain. I felt like I'd saved someone who was suffering. Let's talk a bit about this whole business of living without the Force, which might sound a little strange. If the Force is this wonderful thing, why do we have to know how to live without it? Well, besides acknowledging that becoming a wise monk is pointless if you also stick your head up your ass, it's that to be powerful you have to be willing to let go of power, because if that's not the case, whether you are powerful or not, you become a slave to that power, and you'll make wrong choices out of fear of losing it, and that is a weakness. We see this with the Jedi Council, murdered by Kreia, and with Nihilus and Sion, whom we killed under her guidance. How many stupid decisions do we witness every day? People harming others and themselves just to avoid losing certain things. A job, a position of power, a partner, some facet of their personality. If someone becomes obsessed with any of these things, it's because they consider them a part of themselves, and their fear of losing them will lead them to lose themselves. And then the awful question, how many bad decisions do we make ourselves without even knowing it, because we're blind to our own weaknesses? That's what it means to learn to live without the Force. There is only one last member of the Sith Triumvirate left. Crossing the door takes us to the heart of Malachor, where Kreia awaits. At last we meet face to face again after the Jedi Council's judgment. This encounter is always strange. Even though Kreia has lied to us so much and we've been wanting to talk to her for quite some time, the conversation lacks intensity because we already know everything we need to know. We know the nature of our Force, we know Kreia's story, we know her philosophy, what's left to say? So this first part of the conversation is mainly used to clarify any points the player might not have understood, which is quite useful because I admit that the first time you play, you're likely to have missed more than one thing. So right now only one question remains, what does Kreia want? And that question is dangerous, since fans of this game have been debating it for decades. It's difficult to understand Kreia because she mixes truth, lies, truths that conceal lies, and lies that conceal truths. To begin with, many people become obsessed with the threat that Kreia wants to kill the Force, perhaps because it's a strange and almost incomprehensibly massive concept that will have repercussions throughout the universe. But I think this is a lie. I think it's an excuse Kreia made up to force the exile to go to Malachor. Kreia needs control. The final step of her tutelage of the exile is for them to face each other in the heart of Malachor V. She can't risk the exile choosing to leave. Whether you're a Jedi or a Sith, this threat ensures that the exile will come here. If you ask her about this, Kreia gives an apparently logical reason for hating the Force. The Force seems obsessed with the eternal conflict between good and evil, light and darkness, no matter how much blood is spilled or how many people uninvolved in the conflict suffer because of it. Not to mention how offensive the idea of destiny is to someone as obsessed with control as Kreia, the notion that we cannot truly choose. But even this could be argued to be a lie. On Telos, when the handmaiden asks you what the Force is, you can let Kreia answer, and all the definitions she gives are beautiful. What hides that this is a lie stems from a misunderstanding of what the Force is. Atris and Kreia speak as if killing the Force would mean the death of all Jedi and Sith, the death of the abstract concept of destiny, but that's not what the Force is. The Force is everything. It is in the seas, the rocks, the skies, it is in goodness, in evil, and in all of us. The death of the Force would be the death of everything. In Episode 8, Luke teaches Rey what the Force is, and in this discussion, I think it's important to highlight one of the best, most underrated lines. The Force does not belong to the Jedi. Saying that if the Jedi die, the light dies, is vanity. I think that in Kreia's case, it also applies in reverse. The Force does not belong to the Jedi. Saying that if the Force dies, only the Jedi die is vanity. To this we add that there's something else that many Kreia fans don't understand. She isn't perfect either, she has flaws too. Kreia continually insults Adam, but they both have one particular thing in common. They both hate droids and treat T3 badly, albeit for different reasons. Adam's mental defense works on Jedi and his masquerade on people, but he has no way to deceive the droids, which is why he fears them. Adam seems to grow a bit fond of T3 later on, but Kreia doesn't. Kreia believes that the droids cannot have the Force within them, and she hates them because she cannot manipulate them as she does Adam, the disciple, or Atris. Kreia fears T3 because he is the only one she cannot manipulate to control her tutelage of the exile. But droids can indeed sense the Force. The Force exists in everything and everyone. After all, the exile can influence T3, HK, and Goto's alignments despite them being droids. Perhaps the death of the Force isn't a lie but a backup plan. What Kreia would do if the exile fails to learn her teachings. makes sense, but it's only speculation. We've talked enough. It's time for the final battle. It's time for the apprentice to surpass the master. The final battle is divided into two phases. The first is a simple, bland duel that ends quickly when you cut off Kreia's remaining hand. But then, Kreia pulls out her spirit lightsabers. One question many people ask is, hey, if the Jedi can throw their lightsaber and use the Force to bring it back to their hand, what's stopping them from doing what Virgil does, telekinetically wielding a gazillion lightsabers and attacking their enemies from a distance? Well, Kreia responds by attacking us with 3 lightsabers, also showing us what Yoda taught Luke in episode 5. Don't underestimate them. Don't underestimate Kreia just because she's old or doesn't have hands, because her ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. I would really like to say that the second phase of the battle is a long, difficult, and memorable fight, but it isn't. Without a doubt, it's much better than the fights against Atris, Nihilus, and Sion, the only one of the 4 where you can actually be in danger and something special is happening, but it still isn't that great. The lightsabers deal good damage, but they get stuck on each other with their movements, limiting their attacks. Kreia doesn't move from the center of Malachor, so if you back away, she'll just stand there, not even using her potent force powers while you attack her lightsabers. And, by the way, if you take out all 3, the fight ends. This is a summary of KOTOR 2's combat in general. Even at its best, it's just eh. But since everything around it is awesome and building your character is so much fun, the end result is good. Very good. We have overcome the final challenge. We have surpassed the woman who is both our master and the master of the Sith Triumvirate. This is what Kreia wanted. So after her defeat, the conversation becomes much less hostile. Again, we could spend a lot of time debating what Kreia actually wanted, as fans have been doing for years, and perhaps I'm wrong to view all of this through my own biased lens, but I want to make my part. Sion says something during his battle that I think he gets exactly right. What Kreia wants most is to be right. Kreia was everywhere, and everywhere she was rejected. She was a Jedi historian, like Atris, and saw how those Jedi ignored their past and made mistakes. When she tried to fix them, she was rejected. Perhaps that's why she decided to follow her first student, Revan, into the war. After the war, Revan, Malak, and those Jedi fell to the dark side. But Kreia wasn't interested in the dark side. Anyone can fall. She was interested in the wound in the Force at Malachor V, a new, unknown, mysterious power. She channeled it, made it part of herself, understood it, and passed her knowledge on to new students, who took the power without comprehending it and exiled their teacher. Rejected by the Jedi, rejected by the Sith, watching everyone sink into their own misery, what Kreia wanted most was vindication, to see that her teachings were correct, to confirm that those who were wrong were others, not her. And then she met you, an exile like her, the creator of the wound on Malachor V, the one who carries it within. Kreia, old and weary, decided to pass on everything she had learned to you. You would be her last student, her final attempt to prove that her philosophy is what this galaxy needs to move forward. And whether you're good or evil, you prove it by making it this far. You surpass the Council, you surpass Atris, Nihilus, Sion, and her. You move forward where others had stood still. Apathy is death, and you are life. You are what Kreia desired, and she expresses love. There are many father figures in fiction. Hell, we're in Star Wars, the story that made the I am your father villain popular. But mother figures are rarely explored, especially when it comes to having conflict with one. Kreia comes across as your mother, trying to educate you so you can overcome a world collapsing under its own weight. She loves you, in her own way, of course.
I would have killed the galaxy to preserve you. I would have let the galaxy die. You are more rare than you know, and what you have taught yourself must not be allowed to die. You are not a Jedi, not truly, and it is for that I love you.
Kreia also confirms something for you that, if you've been paying attention, you should already know. In KOTOR 1, Revan, Malak, and their group were called the Sith Empire, but they weren't. They were Jedi who fell to the dark side and soldiers who wanted to take revenge on the Jedi in the Republic. In this game, Sion, Nihilus, and Kreia are called the Sith Triumvirate, but they aren't Sith. They are 3 Force users who learned to channel the wound of Malachor V. Kreia confirms that Revan learned that the true Sith Empire lies beyond the unknown regions, waiting to conquer the galaxy. That's why Revan, during the Jedi Civil War, attacked the Republic but caused minimal damage. That's why he tried to turn Jedi to his side instead of just killing them. Revan sought to transform the Jedi Order and the Republic into a Sith Empire strong enough to face the Phantom Menace, the true Sith. After the events of KOTOR 1, he realized that this kind of threat cannot be eliminated through war, and he went to them, alone. Now you, Kreia's other beloved student, Revan's loyal general, must go to his aid. Before you leave, Kreia gives you one last gift. As she dies, she sees the future and answers your questions. This is where the consequences of everything you've done matter. Just like Fallout New Vegas had that final sequence where you're told what happened to every place you'd visited and every follower you'd met, here Kreia tells you the future of the planets you've visited and each member of your party. If you were evil, she'll say you've made everything worse, but as I've been saying all along about this game, the light side is more satisfying. Onderon will be a great help to the war-torn planets. Dantooine will rise again. The suffering on Nar Shadda won't end but has been alleviated, and Telos will live and be the paradise it once was. There's a Star Wars term I've been waiting a long time to mention. There's a lot of talk about the Grey Jedi, but I think they're misunderstood. Many speak of them as if they were something completely separate from the Jedi, when there are many Jedi who call themselves Jedi that could be considered Grey Jedi, particularly Qui-Gon Jinn and Luke Skywalker. Adding the word Grey to Jedi is used to highlight that said particular Jedi has not closed themselves off to the darkness of the world, does not repress their emotions, and is not blind to the potential corruption or arrogance within themselves and those they admire. Some call Kreia a Grey Jedi because in the end, you could say it was all to give you the power you needed to save the galaxy alongside Revan, which is something good. But once I heard someone say something very interesting, and I think they're right. If there's such a thing as a Grey Jedi, there might also be a Grey Sith, and that's where Kreia comes in. She is an indisputably horrible, manipulative person. She has threatened and mistreated the other party members, and she doesn't hesitate to let others suffer for her own benefit. But she isn't blind to the value of the light and of connections, and she doesn't make many of the mistakes that a typical Sith does. Remember that even if you play as someone from the dark side and you are horrible, Kreia is satisfied with you. Kreia says that your travels across the planets were to find the Jedi, yes, but not the Jedi Council, those arrogant old fools. Your journey was to find your students. They were the true lost Jedi. They were the hope you were meant to ignite. It's strange when you realize this dark game has the balls to hit you with the real treasure was the friends we made along the way. Your students, Brianna, Mikal, Visas, and Mira, will have learned from you how to be better, and they will help others by resurrecting the Jedi Order. This time founded on your teachings, which are, of course, Kreia's teachings improved by you. And with that, at last, she dies. You have a farewell with your students. They must stay in the light while you march into the darkness. If Adam lost to Sion, you'll find him dying and comfort him as he passes away, a horribly sad scene. But if he won, he shows he has no intention of staying with the other apprentices. He was and still is your loyal guardian. This dark ending seems less ominous when the last thing you hear is a friend trying to downplay the storm that's approaching.
Need any company? I mean, I'm not doing anything. Besides, if I'm not around to bail you out of trouble, who knows what could happen. Alright then, where are we going again? I mean, because last time we were heading towards this mining colony on the edge of space and there was this Sith Lord and...
This is the end of KOTOR 2, but it's not over yet.
Not yet, Snake. It's not over yet.
Games are often made in trilogies. There are exceptions, of course, but it's usually 1, 2, 3. In fact, this is largely thanks to Star Wars. The first installment, A New Hope, introduces the heroes and they enter the action. The second, The Empire Strikes Back, injects more darkness, makes the protagonists suffer, they don't succeed and complicates the plot, which serves to give greater weight to the third installment, Return of the Jedi, where the hero, so to speak, is reborn and confronts the deep darkness, this time succeeding and bringing the trilogy to a happy ending. Many books, movies, and video games have been divided into trilogies following this pattern. KOTOR clearly did the same thing. The first was A New Hope, the second was The Empire Strikes Back. How was KOTOR 3? Well, there wasn't one! Why? Because of a dark shadow far more powerful than the hidden Sith. Capitalism! Around that time, MMOs were becoming popular. World of Warcraft debuted that same year, and Final Fantasy XI had been around for 2 years. So whoever was in charge had an idea. KOTOR 3 will be an MMORPG. Look, the idea of a Star Wars MMO is brilliant. Few IPs could pull it off, and the massive Star Wars, with its extensive lore of movies, comics, novels and video games, republics, empires, Jedi, Sith, bounty hunters, a galaxy surrounded by planets yet to be discovered in the unknown regions, could have been absolutely amazing. The problem was twofold. One, that MMO, simply called Star Wars The Old Republic, is garbage. I don't know much about MMOs, but from what I understand, it's mediocre at best. Most people who play it only do so because it's a Star Wars MMO and they like Star Wars. I tried playing it with a friend and found it incredibly boring. The second problem is that KOTOR 2 ended in a situation impossible for an MMO, with all the Jedi dead and the exiled students starting a new order. So, to create this MMO, they had to do a 300-year timeskip, by which point there's already a massive Jedi Order and a vast Sith Empire, both with the numbers appropriate for an MMO. But then, what the hell happened with Revan and the Exile? Isn't KOTOR the story of these two? Well, that's what tons of fans said, so they explained it in a novel, an explanation so fucking bad that if I bought it instead of reading it online, I definitely would have burned it. T3 finally tells the Exile that it's time to go with Revan, so after chatting with Bastila for a bit, off they go! The Exile, T3, HK47 and Adan are going. Well, no, Adan isn't there. Why? He was there at the end. Well, I don't fucking know. Maybe he died of spontaneous combustion like Beodor. Revan found the true Sith Empire, but ended up imprisoned by one of its members. We're off to a bad start. Revan is the Chad of Star Wars. So if he was in trouble, it should have been for something more significant than just one villain. Then the Exile shows up, convinces the Sith who imprisoned Revan to switch sides, and they go to beat up Emperor Vitiate, who couldn't be more boring. During KOTOR 2, the Sith Triumvirate was already in hiding, but Kreia says that all the villains we've fought in both KOTOR games aren't the real Sith. They are somewhere beyond the No Galaxy, an unknown danger that only those who do not fear the unknown can face. Revan and the Exile. So for that great evil to be something as simple as more bad guys and an emperor who wants to wipe out everyone is a bit of a letdown. But no, Jesus, you're wrong. Vitiate is special because he can absorb the force from the dead to make himself stronger and wants to destroy the galaxy to attain ultimate power. Oh, so he's like Darth Nihilus, but without being interesting. Excellent for the big bad. By the way, he was the one who manipulated the Mandalorian Wars. He showed Mandalore the ultimate visions of the Mandalorians conquering the galaxy, making him believe it was the future. So that guy fucked things up because he was convinced victory was inevitable. I would have liked to see his face after Malachor V. Well, Revan, the Exile, the new Sith, T3 and 4, and HK47 face Emperor Vitiate, and they get fucked. T3 and 4 is blown up, the Exile is killed, and HK47 and Revan are captured and super mega mind slaved, and they want to sell it to you as a win, because the Exile uses the Force even in death to connect Revan and the Emperor, altering their emotions and causing Vitiate to postpone his conquest and not attack for 300 years, since the entire novel is a goddamn excuse to justify the timeskip for an MMO. And at least Revan comes back in the MMO because during that strange state when he was connected to Vitiate, he didn't age, which is an excuse for some weird thing to later split him into a good Revan and an evil one, so on the one hand we can talk to the good one and on the other hand we can fight the bad one, but it doesn't matter. This doesn't matter at all. Just to make the MMO, they threw away all these beloved characters whose stories still had to continue. The adorable T3 and 4 dies. The Exile, the Force-wounded apprentice of Kreia, this fascinating character with such spectacular powers, is killed. That was her fate apparently, she dies and that's that, and the great Revan got to eat shit for 300 years. A lot of people say Disney ruined Star Wars, when Star Wars was perfectly capable of ruining itself without any help. At least, Luke, Han, and Leia had their full original trilogy, and then they made the sequels, whether you like them or not, but Revan and the Exile weren't given that mercy. Their stories were cut short. It's like, imagine Episode 6, when Luke manages to redeem Vader, the Emperor just kills them both with force lightning as if they were nothing, and R2-D2 dies too, because fuck you. And then we do a time skip to the future for episode 7. For those of you who hate the sequel so much, keep in mind that it could have been much, much worse. Excuse me for the slight tangent, but do you read X-Men? Part of those comics is supposed to be how Charles Xavier's ideology is the right one, or at least the better one, that one day the union between humans and mutants will be achieved, and how Magneto's ideology is wrong, that such a union is impossible and that for mutants to survive they must exterminate humans. But the very nature of Marvel Comics as an endless story throws this out of the window. Humans and mutants will never unite, because if they did, the X-Men comics would lose their status quo, their usual drama and the familiarity that keeps so many people buying them. It's the same here. When Kreia says she hates the Force because it seems to manipulate everyone to provoke countless conflicts, she seems to be talking about the writers and authors rather than the Force itself. Everything about Star Wars is so iconic that the creators of new stories, whether in movies, series or video games, don't dare to do anything outside the status quo. There are some slightly different things like Endor, which is super good by the way, but it's just on the edge of the status quo, not outside it. There will always be a Republic, there will always be Jedi, there will always be Sith. The Jedi Order will always start off great, but over time they'll fall into the same old mistakes and be destroyed by a great evil until a great hero emerges, revives the Jedi Order, and everything starts all over again. When I saw episode 8, a big part of why I liked it so much was that it seemed like it was finally going to break Star Wars out of its status quo. Rey isn't descended from anyone. Kylo kills the Emperor-esque figure, and Luke declares that the Jedi must end. Although, well, he also says, I will not be the last Jedi, so take that with a grain of salt. I don't know if Rian Johnson or the writers of episode 8 were going to do what I'm now theorizing, but it seemed like episode 9 would culminate with Kylo's death or redemption, and with Rey and Leia, having become aware of the Jedi's flaws through Luke, finally starting something new. Perhaps the end of the Jedi and the Sith wouldn't come through one side's victory over the other, but through the emergence of a new ideology, one that retains the best of both and gets rid of the worst of both. A new beginning for the galaxy. But the poor reception of episode 8 scared the executives and investors, and episode 9 put everything back into the status quo. Good Jedi, bad Emperor, hero who's the child of a villain, Vader-esque figure who redeems himself, the Rebels/Republic win, the Empire loses, the Jedi Order will be reborn. But don't think I'm just bashing Disney for the sake of bashing Disney like so many others do. I'm highlighting an error that's been repeated for years, because what happened with the sequels is exactly the same as what happened with KOTOR. The first one was cool but stuck within the repetitive status quo. The second broke free from that repetition to do something new, original and unique. And then came episode 9/The Old Republic, born of greed, which stripped everything down to its barest essentials. You have no idea how angry I get every time someone shows off the Old Republic trailers like, this is what Star Wars is really about, just because they see a well choreographed fight scene, and no one can take that away from them. It looks great, but the product they're promoting is simple and mediocre, and is built over the corpses of extraordinary heartfelt works, all for filthy money. It's not a big deal if you like the Old Republic, but you have to admit it's not all that great. Just like I personally enjoy episode 9, but I hate all the things it gets wrong, and there are a lot of them. All this wall of information and words I've just thrown at you was to say that if you think of the Force as the creators of Star Wars works, I'd want to kill the Force too. And in 2004, when this game came out, you didn't even have to go into all of this. You didn't even need to go to the novel, the MMO, or the future of Star Wars. Back then, everything was already a mess because without the restoration content mod, the game's ending was weird and abrupt. Of course people didn't like it. And even with the mod that adds so many good things, it also adds weird stuff and crap. The mod adds a scene in which Kreia kills T3 because she hates that the Exile has grown so fond of a droid she can manipulate. But then T3 is just there. No one says anything. It's weird, it's bad. So while there's an optimal way to play KOTOR 2 on PC with the mod, if you played it in 2004, you got screwed. If you want to play it now on the Switch, it comes without the restoration mod due to some legal issues. At this point, it feels like someone's messing with us on purpose. And sure, Star Wars Fate of the Old Republic has been announced and might resurrect the KOTOR franchise. I hope it does, but even then, the story of the Exile will always remain unfinished. Damn, what a downer. I find it really hard to talk about the final stretch of KOTOR 2 because it blends everything I love. The confrontation with Atris, the handmaiden revealing her name, the deception that leads to Nihilus's defeat, your apprentices uniting against Kreia, Sion's surprisingly sad death, the final showdown with Kreia, the exile walking into the shadows, embarking on a new journey where they'll reunite with their old friend and Kreia's former student, the iconic Revan. All of this is mixed with the fact that the final level design couldn't be any more bland because Obsidian was forced to release the game way too early. If you played it without the mod, the ending is pretty much garbage. Your party members do nothing, HK-47 and T3 and 4 die against Goto, though Vitiate later kills HK-47, so it doesn't really matter. And even with the mod, there are still weird or poorly executed things. And to top it all off, if you play it now in 2026, you have to do so knowing there's no real ending to the story. Because after that, they made a mediocre MMO and the closest thing to a resolution is a fucking novel in which our main characters die. Oh, and the cherry on top, a remake of the first KOTOR was announced. I can't even remember when, it was quite a while ago. My first thought was, damn, I hope it's a hit and they do a remake of the second one, fixing all its weak points, its repetitive moments, polishing the so-so plot elements, maybe even making the gameplay more action-oriented, or right now, I'd be all in for it being in the style of Clegg Obscure, but it got cancelled. Kind of, sort of, some say not really, but yeah, how great, what a joy, what a racket. If you've made it this far, it's because you at least like KOTOR a little, but maybe the average Star Wars fan thinks all of this doesn't matter. Well, no, because ever since Disney announced that all of this wasn't canon, there's clearly been an effort to bring Revan back into canon. In Episode 9, each fleet of the Final Order was named after an ancient Sith. The third fleet was the Revan fleet, making it almost canon because everyone still loves Revan 20 years after the release of KOTOR 1. Let's see what I can come up with to end this retrospective on a less depressing note. One thing doesn't take away from the other. All of this, the novel, the MMO, everything bad surrounding the Star Wars intellectual property in general, none of it detracts from how much of a masterpiece Knights of the Old Republic 2 is. The Exile and her powers, which are an analogy for the RPG mechanics we take for granted. This party of colorful characters who gradually become the new generation of Jedi. The cool levels such as parts of Peragus, the Telos exterior, Goto's ship, the Jedi Temple on Dantooine and the Sith Academy on Korriban, the advance through the Onderon Palace, the brilliant conversations like the first confrontation with Atris, the truths revealed by Adan and Goto, the handmaiden's betrayal, realizing just how much more important T3 is than he seemed, the Jedi Council's judgment, Sion letting go of his powers, practically every time Kreia opens her mouth, despite everything that came afterwards. The fact that Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2 is a masterpiece is undeniable and something no one can take away from me. But I will keep fighting so that one day, even though this story will never have the ending it deserves, that KOTOR 3 that will never exist, I hope that at least this work becomes more and more widely known, so that others will be inspired by it to create new, incredible stories. We will keep fighting for those who come after.